evening. Difficult discussions. We are back once again. However, this time I have a couple new guests that I'm going to be introducing to our conversation tonight. Obviously, we have a lot to unpack given the last week in United States history. And I'm looking forward to how people feel about it on all sides of the issue. So, I'm Johnny, as you all know, and I'm kind of an asshole, but I try to be very objective in my ashholishness when I do this show. So,
Johnny,
always respectful.
real quick.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I think you made a group. I don't know if we're posted on difficult discussions. Are we?
We should be on my page right now, and then when it finishes, I share it to the actual difficult discussions page. So anyone that
Okay,
follows
we're
you
good.
should be able to watch it. I
All right.
believe.
My bad.
If not, direct them to my page and they can watch live. All right.
Will do.
Technical difficulties out of the way. I will give that short introduction for myself. Let's move on to another panelist who's always on. Vernon, introduce yourself real quick.
Vernon, educator, always want people. I think one of the most recent things that I've been hearing a lot is about the divide and the divisiveness in this country. And the one thing that kind of continuing from last week's conversation is we've always had differences, and differences are celebrated. Diversity is celebrated. Diversity makes you better. It's how you treat people when you have differences. It's how you talk to people when you have differences. And also get a perspective that you have no experience or education in, and maybe we can grow together, even if we have differences. But we can't keep living in the Facebook meme world of education. We can't live in the retweet world of education. So that's my goal, to stop that. Be media wise.
My goal.
You know, I think I need a doctor. Is there a doctor in the house?
Paging Dr. Stacey Daring. Hey, you guys, I'm Stacey Daring, aka Professor D, your favorite political science instructor and professor in the Metro Detroit area, always at your service.
Excellent. Now I have two new guests. I know this is wild. We struggled to get new guests. Two in one episode. Please bear with us here. I'm going to start with Andrew because Andrew's been a part of our chat room for quite a little bit now. He's gotten an idea of the conversations we like to have, but this is his first time being on the actual show. So introduce yourself for the viewers. Give us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So Andrew Magnus, got a wife and a couple of kids, live in the Lake Orion area, know Vernon pretty well. My wife and his wife met each other through teaching. So a lot of family members over here with some teaching background. For myself, small business owner, I've opened and closed probably 20 small businesses in the last 20 plus years, most of them centering around buying the assets of failed companies and selling them to successful companies. So a lot of my background comes around business failure and business success.
Excellent. Is there any type of business you wanted to do a shameless plug for real quick?
Nah.
All right. I appreciate it.
Andy will be the sponsor of Difficult Discussions. First sponsorship.
Hey, no show. All right. So I have another guest I'd like to introduce. Dennis, give us a little bit on yourself so the viewers can get to know you.
Yeah. Hey, Dennis Fenrich. Mostly longtime fitness enthusiast. I started working when I was 15. Started following nutrition when I was 21, and I'm 45 now. So kind of my background. Started training people in fitness when I was 26, and then opened a gym in 2013. So just I'm mostly just a nerd on fitness, and I like physics. Outside of that, it's really the extent of it. Single. I don't know if I should say divorced. Usually that puts you in a weird category, but I overcame that, so I'm just happy to be here. So.
All right, excellent. I'm happy to have all of you here. I'm very excited today. We kind of have been on a tirade lately on this channel in relation to politics. We discuss very many different subjects, but unfortunately, given the social climate right now in the United States, politics is kind of at the forefront. And in the political conversation, religion can come into play as well. We've touched on that a little bit. We've touched on one of my passionate subjects, which is the Second Amendment. And obviously, we started by touching on a lot of racial tension that we had that really was boiling over the summer, which has taken a backseat to the political issues that we're going through right now. So that's where I'd like to start as far as our conversation today, because a lot of people have an opinion based on our president and his actions, and there are some people that have opinions to the contrary and have really good perspective from their side on how they feel about it. And I really want to get that to the public because there are a lot of people who share the same feelings, but unfortunately haven't really seen what the other side has to say, more though than already wanting to rebut what they have to say even before they've even said it. So, Vernon, I'm going to start with you because I know you've been very passionate about what's going on, and I'd like to bounce off of your take to another person, and we'll kind of go around a daisy chain. Now that we have four people, I'm really excited. So I'm sorry. Let me just stop talking. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think it boiled down to kind of two things happened after last Wednesday. First thing was this analyst of what was the president's role, either directly or indirectly, with what happened last Wednesday. What responsibility, what ownership, and it kind of spins into the legal trail of what could happen with the president. And then the other thing is what happened in lieu of Wednesday is him being banned from social media. And now the discussion has turned into, is that censorship? Is that the First Amendment being violated? And why are these big tech trying to silence the president? So kind of like my first thing is the president's role. And we've had some great conversations and dialogue about it. And for me, working in public and kind of working in a capacity where our hierarchy, our chain of command is so detailed and outlined, it's so hard for me to take someone's role and compare it to someone else's who's at a lower role, who's a subordinate. So if I'm looking at the hierarchy of a school district, the top person is the board president, technically, because the superintendent is the employee of the Board of Education. But if we're just talking about certified staff members and educators, the superintendent is the top person. If a teacher were to say something to students, it is respected, it's understood, it's valued. But that teacher's words don't have the same impact as the principal's. And that principal's words and directives don't have that same impact as the superintendent. And I think the magnitude of words and the timeline of words are what lead, I don't want to call them the gullible, but believers to take actions that they think someone wants or they think they can do. So it's easy to influence people the higher your position and the magnitude of your position. And I think that's where, for me, it's not a conversation about, even we talked about the legalities of it. It is the actual responsibility of their role. When I started working as an administrator, my tone had to completely change from when I was a teacher, because my tone, and even when I got into administration, my boss said, as a teacher, I impact those 125 to 150 kids in my class every day. As an administrator, I impact 1,500 kids, just like that. So I think that's where the difference is of what the actual role and responsibilities are. But we've had some good conversations about it, and I like to keep those going.
Excellent. All right. Andrew, you have been able to offer some very unique perspective given the collection of people that I have in my chat about the subject, and we've even had a couple tit for tats on our stance on the situation, and I've come to appreciate where you're coming from, because what I value in our our conversation, especially when it comes to you, is that I don't get responses from you that are literally just stating whatever I just said is not true, I'm wrong. You are given validation with your responses, and that's what I truly value, and that's what I typically look for when I am trying to have a conversation with someone. So I'm really curious to get your take on the events of the last week, really so the events of the last 2 months and how they've culminated in the last week, and where we are as a country, and how you feel the role of the president has either have or have not been uh, utilized correctly. So, how do you feel about what we have as a nation right
Sure. So I don't mean to sidestep your question at all. I'll answer it very quickly and then sidestep it. If we're only looking at this week in the last 2 months, what has President Trump done? He's not acted presidential. I think that speaks to Vernon's point. For me, I don't have a problem with that. I truly don't. I don't look at politicians as people that should be looked up to. I respect the superintendent in my small town more than I do any president in my lifetime. So
He's a great guy, my boss.
I don't have that same expectation for the president that I've come to realize other people have. I respect if other people think that that's a position that should act in a certain way. I've just never had that standard. Now, to sidestep your question a little bit, one consistent frustration I've had as a Trump supporter is that all of the focus on Trump seems to be the thing he did today, how he contributed to these problems very recently, as if he didn't come on the scene to a nation that was already fighting with each other and already very divided. And I'll say back when he announced he was running, before he announced he was running, I canceled my sponsorship for our local GOP group just for inviting the guy to speak. I opposed him that much. I've not always been a Trump fan, but seeing people consistently misrepresent what he was saying, starting with the GOP, who, by the way, was trying to push Jeb Bush on us at the time, seeing his words twisted. See, if the guy is so wrong, it should be plain on paper. We should be able to point straight to it and say what he's wrong about. When he's wrong, it's taken in a context as if he's the only person who contributed to the raising of the temperatures. Like he's the only person who contributed to this conflict. I object to that. Lots of people have contributed to this. Lots of people contributed to this before he ever came down that escalator. And I'll throw it back to you. But that's a frustration I've long had as a Trump supporter.
Appreciate that. So I guess one of the ways I look at that, given how you presented it, is that, we've been divided as a country as far as politics all the way back from 2000 when George W. Bush became president. But I can say, from an outsider who's not in politics, looking at the situation, I feel like there was a lot of frustration that built under the George W. Bush administration. Things happened, obviously 9/11, our troops and things of that nature, which soured a lot of people. And I feel like his position as president created a pocket void that brought an opportunity for a female and an African American to actually run for president, because we were so frustrated that we were actually willing to embrace possible change. Here comes Obama. And the funny thing, given your stance on Trump, he was very vocal about Obama and his transgressions, if you will, as a president. And a lot of it harkens back to today, where you look back on those tweets, because he's a tweeter, he likes to tweet, and how they mirror his presidency and how he took issue with a lot of things, and is kind of doing those things now that he took so much issue with under the Obama administration. So I will agree, the divisive nature was pre-Trump. I mean, we've been a divided country since its inception. I just feel like as a president, though, your job is to be a figurehead. So as a figurehead, adding to the division probably isn't a positive. You know, where a lot of people may have voted for Trump because he's not a politician, you are hired to do a politician's job. So there are responsibilities that would go along with that, you know, and that's where I think where a lot of people take issue with the way he presents himself, at least in social media. So I don't want to keep going here. I know this is a show for everyone, so I'm gonna kick it over to Stacy and basically ask you the same question: how you feel, you know, given the social climate and the political, you know, area that we are in. You know, which I don't want to use the term unprecedented because the news has been throwing that around, you know, since last year January. But we are in a unique time frame for our history as far as how we've viewed the world in the United States.
So for me, this probably cuts a little deeper because you guys know I study political science as part of my career and I'm an educator. So when President Trump was running for office, and I can actually go back and look at my memories from 4 or 5 years ago, I actually forecasted that a lot of the things that we see now is happening because he is who he said he was going to be. Now, that's one thing I can admit. Like, he is unapologetically who he said he is and how he's going to be. He's been that way since day one. I can totally agree with that. And when he showed us who he was, I said he's not fit to be in a presidential capacity because he doesn't think like an elected official. He doesn't focus on social welfare and the welfare of people. He's more focused on economy and capitalism and power. And that's not something that is fitting for an elected official running what's supposed to be one of the most powerful nations in the world. And we've seen that unfold and manifest. And while, yes, we've had tension leading up to him even coming into office, right? Police brutality is nothing new. It goes back decades, centuries even. That's nothing new. The only difference is that it's highly videotaped now for everyone to see the same image, even though people spin different narratives off of what you're seeing. That's the only difference. But the problem is when you're in that position of power, like Vernon was alluding to, your level of influence, that's part of your responsibility. Like, if I was to become a police officer or a judge or an attorney, I take an oath. And under these oaths, I have ethical obligations to uphold and maintain. If I'm a public official, I have obligations to uphold, to maintain, to subscribe to. I have to, that's part of the deal, right? It's implicit in my contract. It's inherent that as an elected official, I have to have a standard of conduct and behavior and be responsible with my influence, whether I want to be a role model, a mentor or not. I have a level of responsibility to the country because the citizens who elected me, even if you didn't, you still are counting on me to serve in the capacity that I'm in. So as a leader, it's always detrimental to spread any type of divisive rhetoric or behavior or to push it, and to be unapologetic about mistakes made, especially when we're in a double pandemic. And I say double because racism is the original pandemic. Let's not forget that, okay? Like, you're in a series of crises and you should be exuding leadership. He wants to be looked at as very strong. A strong leader would not divide. You don't conquer when you divide. That's not what you're going to do. Like, you don't divide. You don't create more tension. You don't light the fire. You don't incite destruction on democracy, the same democracy that puts you in office. You don't do that. So that's problematic for me. And one note I want to highlight is this, and this is something I've been noticing within the last year or so. You really have to separate Trumpism from traditional conservative and Republicans, because Trump does not actually really adequately or sufficiently represent the Republican Party. The problem is that the Republican Party have not held him accountable, and it's to their detriment because he's destroying what the core values of your Republican Party was and should be. So you want to detach from that, and that's what you're seeing happening over these past couple of weeks. Literally, people are jumping ship. Like, oh, the ship is sinking, let's jump off. Like, no, I keep that same energy. You was committed to supporting every move he made. And now that, you know, the S has hit the fan essentially, and we've seen chaos and the insurrection, you want to now try to even think about holding him accountable for the actions he's been taking for the past 4 to 5 years. His tone hasn't changed. If anything, it's become more aggressive, and it's become more, he's revealed more of himself to us. Like, this is who he is and who he said he was. So for me, it's the issue of not accepting your responsibility and the role you should be in as president. You're not a dictator. You're not a king. You're a president. You're a public servant, the highest public servant of the land. And you should take that serious and with a higher level of pride and responsibility.
Well spoke. Well spoke. Dennis, what is your take, sir?
This is intense.
No, it's not. I smile all the time during it, Dennis.
Yeah, I'll say what you say with a smile, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, one of the epiphanies I had with trying to talk to people on Facebook was one side would say exactly what they thought they saw and believed, and then the other side would say exactly what they thought they saw and believed, and there was no movement in either direction. It was just two different people saying what they thought they saw and what they believed, and that's just going to escalate. I don't know how that could not escalate.
Mm-hmm.
And I got turned on to a guy named Jordan Peterson. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. And his whole thing about like these two major belief systems colliding was that your best bet for everybody was to aim for peace. To try and find some common ground that we could all agree on and then start talking from there. But trying to do it, because I feel like I saw something totally different. I feel like the whole thing has just been hard to watch. How do you interpret? How can I be 100% positive on what I think when there's you get two totally different stories going on two major news networks, and it's one is saying one thing and one is saying the other, and I'm to the point now where like I don't want to think I'm 100% sure on anything, because I feel like it just makes me confused and frustrated. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. I didn't hear any of the speech. I should have looked up and listened to it for an hour and seen exactly what he said, so I could decide for myself if I thought he was inciting violence. I don't think he was calling for any kind of a terrorist attack, any kind of coup, any of that. I don't think he's shown that behavior. Yeah, he's definitely he can be divisive. He shoots his mouth off. But I go back to policies. I feel like, getting us out of some of these agreements and putting America first was, his priority. I feel like he did some of those things with some of his policies, personally.
Okay.
Amen.
No worries.
Sorry, Johnny.
I was just going to say, basically, I do see where you're coming from in terms of the perception when you're not trying to fully invest in the extremism, because you have extremism on one side and extremism on the other. On one side, if Donald Trump doesn't kiss his wife on the cheek when he wakes up in the morning and gets out of bed, someone's going to say, well, he's terrible. And people take that with too much energy, just like, in terms of a lot of the Black Lives Matter perspective and movement, where people were just taking it way too far. Like, you need to apologize to me because you're a white person. Like, that's not how this works. That's not what we want. You are an extremist, and you can't speak for us because you're on the fringe. So you have a lot of the people on the fringe on one side and people that are on the fringe on the other, and those are the most two vocal, mouthpieces that are trying to represent everyone. And in all honesty, that's not where we are. There are people that disagree with Trump. There are people that disagree with Joe Biden. There are people that disagree with Pelosi and what she does and things of that nature. So I totally get where you're coming from. And in terms of his speech, I think the issue that some people are taking is that, on the one hand, people are saying the events that Trump, the things he said on the 6th incited a riot that resulted in death. However, where I think a lot of the more midline people are looking at the situation, Donald Trump has been stating for months that the election was rigged and he was cheated, which has created a fervor between people who are staunch supporters of his, who would then agree with his position. This is someone that I'm following. They're saying that they were wronged. I agree, because the outcome that we wanted is not the outcome that occurred. That fervor is going to simmer, and then to make the statements where you say, take back our country, you have to fight, things of that nature, those are very strong terms to use, especially when the body of people you're speaking to are on the fringe and they're simmering because they're upset. So I guess it's a situation where you can make the argument, okay, he didn't intend for this to happen. However, he exercised very poor judgment in what he said, because it could be a reckless outcome based on it. And granted, you could say, well, it's not his responsibility for what other people do, which is true, but at the same time, you aren't doing any favors to help the situation. And that brings us back to the position of power that he's in. You should be looking to make the situation better, not stoke the flame, even if you don't think it's going to, burn out of control. So, Vernon, you were ready to make a statement. Go
Yeah,
right ahead.
it's a couple of things, which I agree in one element, but I think, and Andy, you kind of hit the nail on the head with kind of timelines of things and where we were. So I can bring up things like a lot of Trump supporters don't like the trivial criticism, what they believe is trivial criticism. I don't know if Dennis, that you kind of are alluding to that. Andy, you're alluding to that. He says something and CNN is going to nitpick it, right? CNN is going to take everything. I promise you, last night I watched his address to the country, his video, and immediately my wife had CNN on. Immediately, the criticism, you could tell the tone of criticism kind of, it's too late for that. Where was this a week ago? And things like that. Things that I honestly believe. But to act as if trivial criticism of a president just emanated in 2016 is irresponsible, because Barack Obama wore a beige suit to a press conference, and one news network whose viewers want to criticize Obama for anything trivially criticized him, right? And if you're a supporter, you think, man, that was so stupid. Why are they talking about that? Why aren't we talking about policy? Why aren't we talking about X, Y, and Z? And then it happens the other way. So yes, that happens. The role and responsibility, I'll go back to the 90s, Charles Barkley saying, I am not a role model. I don't need the president to be a role model. I need the president to be a president. So I get the element of, I don't need a picture of Jesus, the president, and Martin Luther King. I don't need that in order for him to do his job. But a couple of things that, and Andy has seen it for years, that have always turned me off to Donald Trump, is first off, just because of how I vote, I've never before 2016 had people use being liberal, being a Democrat, in any slanderous method towards me. I mean, never. I promise you. It's guys that I've helped get out of jail for getting DUIs back in college. It's guys that we have done college things together. We have played football together, that all of a sudden will put on their Facebook libtard. Like, first off, I don't like the term retard. Secondly, just to even associate how I vote, pretty much based on like what I want to do with my tax dollars. Like that's kind of the basis of being Democrat, Republican. How I vote, you will use such slanderous terms towards me. That didn't exist during 2007 George Bush second term. And if we say social media was different and things like that, hey, we still went to the bar with these people. We still were on AOL with these people, and you never saw that. So the acceptance of that rhetoric and things like that, that has spewed the divide. Now, I think the thing with moving forward, and even with like criticism of the president, Andy knows this, I've always gone back to two things. I'm a leader. Like, I have a degree in leadership. I question leadership and roles that leaders have. So that's where my perspective is always going to be. I wouldn't hire somebody that does that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't want someone with that same mentality to teach my daughters. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't hire somebody with that nonchalant attitude towards somebody that disagrees with them. I wouldn't want them to work with me in any capacity if that's how they feel. So why would I change my tone for that, for the highest public official? That's what doesn't make sense to me. if I had a teacher that said, hey, I just tell it how it is. This student's dumb as hell. You know, hey, this student's going to wind up on their mama's couch. They're going to live in the basement. Hey, they're not worth a damn. They're not, like, there is no way that a mother or father, anybody would accept that behavior. If someone said, if a principal one day said, hey, the hell with the math department. Math department sucks. English department is where it's at. Math department don't do shit. They just sit there and complain and give out a bunch of homework. English department is moving mountains. What kind of principal or leader would that be? And that's where I'm talking about. I get what got him into office, but at some point, there needed to be some type of shift to where you address the Americans. And I'll be honest, I can't say that when I watch George Floyd get killed, I see one address that says how heinous that was, and then the next address acting like Emmett Till didn't happen 60 years ago. And we're talking about Medgar Evers was murdered on his front lawn. We're talking about Martin Luther King was killed. We're talking about all these things. So please, I want people to always understand, it was not about what happened on Memorial Day 2020. It's the reminder that, damn it, we had a black president, and shit, we're not that far from when we couldn't even go to the same schools as people. And those are the things where I think tones are different. So even when I'm looking at last Wednesday's situation, I'm looking at people that are upset because of fear of what could be. And when I look at this past summer, I'm looking at people that are upset of fears of what has already happened still happening. Those are two completely different things. People are worried about this. We won't even have a country. What the hell does that even mean? Like, do we get taken over? Like, do we have to change our flag? Is our currency going to change? What does that mean? And that's coming from the top official, public servant of the United States. I don't get that.
If I may,
I know I unpacked the whole
that,
lot right there.
Yeah, I mean, what do you?
And he took a deep breath. He was like,
I just get
Like,
I get the feeling we're sitting in the same theater watching different movies.
Right.
When I watch it,
different lenses.
when I watch a Trump rally, the loudest applause is for that decreasing unemployment rate for minorities. When I watch Trump's inauguration and he brings up the PayPal founder, the first time a Republican had brought an openly gay man onto that stage, the crowd went frickin' nuts. When I watch Trump set out on an initiative to use the weight of the United States to stop other nations from outlawing gay marriage, it drives me up a damn wall to have anyone say that this guy's bigoted towards homosexuals. When I watch this guy put out the Trump Opportunity Zones, and I happen to have a property in one, and the average house value on that street goes from $2,000 to $40,000. When I watch billions of dollars brought into that community, it's on the south side of Pontiac at Wilson and Martin Luther, is where our property is at, in the middle of that Trump Opportunity Zone. When I watch policy after policy after policy targeted at relief in the communities that need it the most, not helicopter money, real relief into the communities that need it most, it drives me up a damn wall. To have anyone say that this president hasn't done things to help. And I'll give one of the biggest examples that was an eye-opener for me, that we were all watching different movies, is when Trump gave that speech at Mount Rushmore. I had a tear in my eye after that speech. I said, damn it, I wish the whole country watched that. And I turn over to CNN to see what they say. He denigrated the place. What is this guy doing at the foot of Mount Rushmore? By the next day, all the conservative websites have gone through the tapes and find the same CNN channel, the same CNN anchors praising Democrats who spoke at the foot of Mount Rushmore. The unequal treatment. I tried sharing my screen. I don't know if it came across. My favorite example of the pettiness towards Trump is this CNN case. If you Google it real quick, CNN ran on their actual television screen. You talk about Obama with tan suits. CNN ran on the screen, Trump White House. President gets 2 scoops of ice cream. Everyone else 1. Google it.
hold on, but
Google
I
it.
get that,
Trump
and
2 scoops of ice
promise
cream.
I get that.
Trump 2 scoops of ice cream.
Right. I
They
got
also
that.
made a big deal out of how
But that's
his salt and pepper shaker is bigger than everyone else's. It just drives me
right.
nuts. It drives me absolutely nuts.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
But no,
Okay.
I'm with it, Andy. I promise I'm with it. Here's where we differ. I understand that. So I'm Big Dumb Jock, right? I'm Big Dumb Jock.
Big Dumb.
I joke around about it. Like, I still remember vividly my previous school district. And I remember vividly because I came up the ranks as a football coach, wrestling coach, track coach. I coached 3 sports. I loved Southfield High School, loved the Blue Jays, embraced rivalries, all of those things, right? So it can be sculpted that I'm just another coach where I have a teaching job, but I'm just another coach. And my boss used to emphasize, he's not just another coach. He teaches AP Calc. He teaches AP Stats. Like, he teaches the cream of the crop in our building. He is a department chair. He is initiating things. So if I know that the rhetoric that could be said about me, it is negative in one end, part of me works hard to understand that I do not perpetuate that stereotype or those ideals that are being said about me. So we could go back and forth with what Sean Hannity said during 2008 to 2016. We could go back and forth with how Don Lemon and people criticize Donald Trump. I think one of the differences is Barack Obama didn't go to his Twitter and almost shame Fox News in a method of defamatory statements and in a method of becoming a victim. Those are 2 different responses to the same ridiculous criticisms. And when we also talk about the benefits, I don't want to ever say this. I love looking at lists of all of the things Donald Trump has done. I don't know what people you're looking at, but nobody said he didn't go to work at all in 4 years. Secondly, nobody says that we still don't have another third of government in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And just because Schoolhouse Rock, I understand how, well, I'm only a bill. I understand how that works. So if I'm going to pat him on the back, I'm going to pat the House of Representatives on the back. I'm going to pat the Senate on the back. And that's what the United States government is. That's why I also oppose when I hear they're all crooked and they're all this and they're all that. And when I'm looking at people driving for bipartisanship, the outcome isn't good enough. And I'm not minimizing the things that Trump has done that have been benefits to whatever groups. But because I put a roof over someone's head, because I pay bills, doesn't mean I can disrespect my wife, or I can treat my kids like shit, or I can say negative things, print negative things about any of those people. Just because I provide something doesn't mean I can't treat people a certain other way and I'm all good. It doesn't exempt you. So if I'm as a building leader or a public figure, if I do great things, but then I tell you you need to kiss my feet for it. If I do great things, but then I say inflammatory things about you, like I don't want to say, like, I've never been called a baby murderer more than I have in the last 4 years. And it's not even because I've said shit about abortions. It's been because I've been a Democrat, a voting Democrat. Like, literally, I understand that he went and did a job in D.C. And there's 100 senators. There's 500 and I'm on. I hope I
438 reps.
Reps. Other people did work too. Like, other people did work. It has to pass through the House to even get to the Senate. HBs become SBs. SBs get signed by the President of the United States. So I get all of that, but damn, I heard that nothing has happened for the previous 47 years from Congress. 47 years of nothing happening. That's bullshit too. So if we're going to put the energy into celebrating him, we have to put the energy into criticizing him, and we have to put the energy into celebrating our Congress and put the energy into those other things. That's just me. So, I get that, but just because houses went from $2,000 to $40,000 in Pontiac, guess what? The mean family house in Farmington Hills is $215,000. So what the hell does that mean that the house is worth $40 in Pontiac? Like
It was worth $2. It was worth $2,000. It went up 20x.
Economical.
I'm good with
an economical advantage.
But
and
that's
it's
just
unfortunate
but
that
Andy, what I'm saying is that's just like I'm not unemployed. I can't collect unemployment. I make $13 an hour. I got 2 kids and a wife, and I make $13 an hour. Thank you for boasting about our unemployment numbers. But when I'm looking at the wealth gap that went from here to here, we again, I'm not saying that if we're going to criticize those numbers or we are going to celebrate those numbers, same energy has to be for our shortcomings also.
Slight adjustment. I said the loudest cheers were for those stats, and I say that in the context of how did we elect someone like Trump? How did we ever even get to 2016 where he was being elected? I'll tell you how I turned around to voting for him. It was being called a racist every time I had any opinions about Barack Obama. It was being called a sexist anytime I had opinions about abortion. It was people repeatedly telling me they feel bad for my daughters and bad for my wife if I dared speak up on the topic of abortion. You say being called a baby murderer, that's a pretty heated topic, and a lot of disgusting rhetoric goes both directions. I'll throw this over to Doc if I may do so. Johnny, you said something earlier about the divisiveness. One thing I'd like to point out that I don't think gets nearly enough coverage in the media, redistricting played a massive role in that. We used to have a lot more of our seats were toss-up seats where you had to get a moderate Republican versus a moderate Democrat if you hoped to win that seat. Democrats at one point had a chance to redistrict and made a value decision. I don't disagree with it, but it had real consequences to make sure that they had minority majority districts. And in doing that, you have seen the Democrats nominate and elect a lot more minorities than they had before. I don't begrudge them for it, but if in the raw game of politics, what that did was open the door for Republicans to go slice and dice. The white districts, the rural districts. Mm-hmm. Republicans have been criticized for doing that, but the door was opened by the Democrats making that value judgment. Don't begrudge either. It's naked politics, but the final result, to Johnny's point, has been divisiveness because you have a whole lot of seats where someone can be as radical a Democrat as they want or as radical Republican as they want, and they're going to get reelected. And if we really want to lower the temperature amongst our elected representatives, redistricting has to be on the table to create more competitive districts, forcing more moderates in.
That's happening in Michigan, so you guys know what happened in 2018. So that's like happening here, but I don't think that's happening across the country, obviously. But that could be a blueprint model for other states to adopt once they see the success rate and the changing that occurs when we hit the 2022 midterms and then the 2024 presidential election. But I just want to know real quick that you see how you are discussing, or we're discussing, Trump's victories and things that he has done. The unfortunate part is that his legacy has been self-sabotage tarnished, because instead of having that highlight and be at the forefront, he's chosen to be so divisive and have such a negative rhetoric that's overshadowed his good. So when your bad overshadows your good, you forget about the good. It's kind of like, a dope dealer who you already know how dope and cocaine destroys the neighborhood, but because they give out dinners on Thanksgiving or they pay for a couple kids to go to school, you like, what about that? But no, your negative, your legacy, that's what overshadows the positive things you did. So for him, instead of focusing on red versus blue states and conservative versus liberals and democratic cities and Republican cities and states, he should have been focusing on, hey, as a nation, this is what we're doing to address A, B, and C. This is what we're going to do and come together. This is what I've had the administration do. If he took that role, which is a presidential role, instead of more of a, divisive role, we will be having a whole different conversation today. That's the problem.
I agree. I just don't feel like he gets covered in that regard. I mean, he has made multiple statements about condemning violence or whatever, and a lot of times the stuff just doesn't get put out. It just gets ignored by side, and the only thing it gets shown is the things he does wrong or the things people don't like. So I don't feel like, well, I don't think the news covers things. It's not even the news anymore. If we call it the media, it's more of a show.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, Dennis. But here's where I think the difference is. When you, and that's what I'm talking about with a responsibility. I never have to apologize for something I don't say. You don't have to apologize for something you don't say. People say that's being too political and things like that. No, it's being responsible with your words. So it's hard to say,
no doubt
celebrate.
About it.
I'm not even saying celebrate. Value when I say be peaceful. When I'm on the record telling someone you should kick their ass. Like that makes no sense to me. When I use my platform, I go to a rally and I call somebody a sumbitch, or I say that we should do X, Y, and Z to people like this. Once you do that, that's always going to, and I mean, this is information for the ethers. Watch what you tweet. Watch what you do. I've talked about this so much on the show. I love going back to my alma mater and talking to the college football players and talking about hiring practices. And I tell kids all the time, the first thing I do when I get an application for somebody, I scour social media. And I don't scour social media to get them to agree with me. But I always say my rule is your last 10 posts, shares, retweets. I look at your 10 posts. And Dennis, if I go on your social media right now, I guarantee I don't even have to know you, and I'm going to see fitness or politics that I vote for. It depends on the platform. It's never changed. Your Instagram, if you see somebody posting about certain rhetoric 10 times, that is what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
But if my last 10 tweets don't say or don't tell the story of my life, then guess what? That was my responsibility. So I understand and we talked about this, he gave a speech on Wednesday that lasted for over an hour. And 4 seconds, one sentence mentioned the word peace. The word. And that was it. And I get even the word patriotic was in there. But you have to understand and have a responsibility to understanding that, all right, some of my voters, some of my biggest supporters believe in patriotism in the 1776 way. They believe in patriotism as the revolutionaries. They believe in patriotism as standing up against the establishment, which, whether you agree or disagree, we are nowhere near the same situation in 2020 that we were in 1776. So I'm understanding that he's heavily criticized, but I'm also saying he should understand why. If I say the math department is great after I just called them shit 2 weeks ago, they're not going to forget that I just called them that.
Did we not just go through a whole year of people burning down federal buildings and attacking police stations and actually doing billions of dollars of damage and having the biggest voices in the media excusing it? Did we not just watch that?
But wait, what are the biggest voices in media? Because we just talked about Fox News and CNN have conflicting views. So I've never seen anything on Fox News that condoned it. I've never seen anything.
That condone what?
I can't go through a episode of Sean Hannity that condoned it. So it's two people with two different views. Yeah. But I will say this.
I'm sorry. Has violent behavior as a legitimate response to political situations that people disagree with not been accepted in the last 12 months?
Yes, the way I would answer that question.
You believe that as much as some people that you just talked about thinking that it's 1776 right now? You believe that as much as they do?
I went to 5 protests this summer. Not one thing happened. and I'm talking about I went to protest in Detroit, Michigan, the
Mhm.
murder capital of the world,
Mhm.
the poorest state, or I'm sorry, the poorest city in the United States.
Mhm.
And I went to
Mhm.
protest, and I have no idea what you're talking about. I live in Michigan.
You're saying
I
there
didn't
was
see.
no violence?
Hold on. I'm talking about. I could go to Hart Plaza. I could go to the Spirit of Detroit. I could go to the Nike store downtown. Not one shop was boarded up. Not one government. Not one precinct in Detroit was burned down.
So what are you saying though?
No. So what
Detroit,
I'm saying is,
Detroit was held up nationally as doing a phenomenal job with the police chief working to
then
quell
no.
riots.
But then when you hear of them cities and them states accepting and condoning violence, there's not one state. I don't care if you go to Portland. I don't care if you go to Seattle. I don't care where you go. You cannot tell me that no one was arrested. You can't tell me that.
No, I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about the media. The media reaction. Like Dennis was talking about, the media just,
those are two different things.
the media portrays things in such wildly different ways. That CNN screen where the reporter is standing in front of a burning building and says, the CNN screen says, protests, fiery but mostly peaceful. I cannot tell you how much that pissed off business owners. That's someone's livelihood that's on fire right there. And you've got the media standing in front of a burning building saying, and I don't think that was BLM. I think that was the same damn anarchists that are trying to take advantage as counter protesters and agitators on all kinds of protests. Okay? I'm talking about the media exclusively, not the civil rights movement. You've got to understand that there's a lot of people over here that watched all summer. I watched videos of small business owners crying, grown humans crying, because their entire life had been burnt to the ground, crying, saying, I've given my entire life to this neighborhood. What did I do to deserve this? Minority business owners standing in front of their life burned to the ground. And CNN has the balls to get on the screen and stand in front of a burning building and put on their screen fiery but mostly peaceful protests. And my point is, Trump is not the only person. Trump is not the only person who used soaring rhetoric or who may have, I'll give it to you, let's say normalized violence. I disagree with that, but I'll give it to you. We watched it for an entire year, though.
Let me take a moment.
But no.
I know you guys are bear with me for just a moment. I kind of want to interject just to make sure my mic doesn't go out because we've had issues with that before for my viewers. But let me just interject quickly. I've had some stuff pop up in the comments, and I think all of that really can tie into what we have here. So I get what you're saying, Andrew, and I guess my answer to that would be, why were the businesses burning? I mean, I'm just asking you a question just for a quick answer, and I'm a segue from your answer to continue the statement that I want to make. Why were the buildings burning? Why do you feel the buildings were burning at least? And I'm not talking about like, you know, who may have been responsible for doing it and their motives. I'm just saying, why were we in a situation for the last year where these things were happening? What was the reasoning that you feel was behind that?
A lot of people who feel their government has not been responsive and accountable to them.
Now,
well, it's not government. It's
let me,
law enforcement.
because I just want to try to clear this up to tie into some people that were in the comment section to show that we are paying attention to that. So what we have was unrest in the communities due to the repeated murder of unarmed individuals, to then be told their background and history was justification for their death, or what they may have done to lead someone to feel they needed to die. That is a staunch difference than one man stating that he lost an election due to foul play, and that we should have that same level of unrest to quote unquote take back our country, which then led people to go into the Capitol building, even if it wasn't because of Trump's words that day or Trump's words 2 months ago. The fact that they were emboldened to then go and proceed to potentially overthrow the government. Because let's say that they actually did have a plan, because what I saw was not people with a plan. You're walking around with podiums, petty, theft and miscellaneous destruction. That's not an end game, and there were people there with zip ties, so maybe they were prepared to take hostages if they could have gotten some. So we don't know how far it could have gone, but regardless, the action that was taken was an action against the United States of America. Now, you take that and you ask the question, why is this happening? You have a collection of people, and I'm not here to debate whether or not he was cheated or not. You literally feel that the president of the United States lost the election due to dubious means, and you felt the need to take up arms to right that wrong. As a nation, and I know you can disagree with this from our comments in the actual chat about the evidence that was provided versus whether or not it was vetted or not, the overarching decision, even from the courts, which had, Republican representatives, stated that the evidence provided was not sufficient. So you're conflating a group of people who are upset about an election that the overarching nation has agreed, you lost, to people who are saying, stop killing us. And
That's not what I'm saying, and I was careful not to say that.
Hold on, let me finish, because you're saying, you're looking at the buildings burning, and you're upset with CNN saying, fiery but mostly peaceful. That putting that together,
the media
A
complaint.
group of people who have video evidence, and this is what happened. This is here. We see it. The country last year, having seen someone get strangled for 9 minutes, finally had to stop and say, man, maybe that is wrong. So now you have a large collection of the United States who is on board with the belief that this level of brutality is not right. So it was socially accepted to take that stance that it's wrong. Whereas previously, people weren't really willing to have that conversation to even suggest that the police may have been doing something wrong. That changed. So you have a situation where I believe any person you ask, look them dead in the eye, do you feel that police brutality is a problem? The majority of people would agree. Now, there are people that still fought the good fight, gave reasons why these people were dead, how a woman could get shot 8 times in her sleep and somehow have it be justified. You still had that, of course, but they are no longer the majority. They are the minority. Businesses, in the United States, we are all about catching a wave. Something happens, people latch onto it, everyone wants to jump on the wave. So people saw the support and they started jumping on. So now everywhere you turn, you turn on a video game, you call on Call of Duty, it says Black Lives Matter on the screen. Whether you support it or are involved in it or not, it's on there because now the overarching public has jumped on this wave. So I don't see how you can take that level of anger, especially with a media caption at the bottom of the screen about a business burning, and the business is burning because people are dying, and we are asking for that to stop, as opposed to we feel we were cheated. We've had ample opportunity to provide evidence to show that, and we are in a digital area where even if the powers that be at these large news stations wanted to suppress that information, you can get it out there. If a girl posts a nude one time online and immediately deletes it, it will never go away. It will always be online. So you can't just make things disappear. There will always be an element that's available. So again, for the overarching public, it makes it hard for us to accept that the fraud is legitimate when there has been nothing that can be provided without loose context or conjecture to make us believe that. And I, like I said, I'm completely objective, and I don't know if you know this, but I voted for Donald Trump. So believe me, if they would have shown something that I could see with my own eyes, that I can't say this is just a static image, what is the context? If you're showing me something happening where I can't refute it, just like a man being strangled, I can side with that. And I don't think we would have needed to take up arms against the government, because the overarching public would also have to see that. You will have the extreme to the left. It's like, nope, you lost. Nancy Pelosi, don't want to hear it, you lost. But at the same time, give that evidence, that level of evidence where people can see it with their own eyes. That where I feel is the difference. And then you also take into context, you are putting a value on property which can be replaced, which is more than likely insured, with life that cannot be replaced.
No, I'm not. I want to be very clear that I'm not.
Well, I mean,
I want to be very clear that I'm not.
I'm just saying that's what I'm getting from you when you discuss your outrage on property damage versus the outrage over the summer over loss
I
of
understand
life.
that's
And
what you hear, but that's not what I said.
Right. Well, I get what.
But even still, with the Capitol situation, we still got loss of life. So we have a situation where we're looking at the Trump outrage that results in death and the outrage of social injustice, which resulted in property damage because people were so fed up about not being heard, so fed up with the police walking after doing this time and time again, no charges or the charges are dropped. What are you left to do? I am not justifying.
It's not an argument I want to have, but do you really want to compare deaths on January 6th to deaths during BLM marches?
But I'll say this: I only got a degree in mathematics. I understand that, but you're talking about one event that led to 6 deaths now. You're talking about one day. You're talking about a couple.
You're going to count heart
6 deaths.
attacks? You're going to count heart attacks and suicides?
But why were they there? What led to it?
The
But
root
I'm fine with that. But the 2 police officers and the woman that was trying to get through the window, that's 3. That's fine. I can reduce it to 3. But I'm talking about 3, and then I'm going to talk about the fact that I didn't see any property damage in the summer of 2020 in Northville, Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, Lake Orion, Michigan, Oxford, Michigan. I mean, I could go down my list. So I understand what the media portrayed it as Democratic cities burning or cities.
Vernon, it was $2
But then I want to go
to $3 billion nationally.
Oh, okay. I don't know how much a life costs because now you're going back to talking about property, and we were talking about lives. I'm talking about lives. I'm talking about when you hear peaceful. I understand you're talking about property damage and all those other things, but I guess we don't.
You want me to look up how many deaths there were during BLM marches?
32.
It really misses the
30.
Is that more than 6? What it really misses misses the point. It really misses the point.
But, okay,
Vernon, you're talking about going to BLM marches. You went to 5 and you saw no violence,
please,
right?
Please stop. Black Lives Matter, because I'm talking about. I went to social justice marches. I didn't go to BLM marches.
And you didn't see violence, right?
Justice marches.
And you didn't see violence, correct?
I went to social justice, and I want to be clear, because I don't like the BLM because it creates this narrative in people's minds of a terrorist group. I went to social justice marches in the summer. So please, and I will tell anybody out there, once you say BLM, you are trying to create the same feeling and the same response emotionally to Antifa, to ISIS, to Al Qaeda.
I'm not.
That people.
And I'll show you why.
I'm not saying you. I'm saying.
I'll show you why.
But
I don't think that community was the ones burning down black neighborhoods.
No.
I think that was Antifa and anarchists flying under the banner of social justice, antagonizing and discrediting the movement. I believe that happened. And I watched the media. Ignore that and act like it was somehow okay to burn down black neighborhoods. You had white anarchists being arrested for burning down black businesses, specifically the Wendy's in Georgia. And you had the media just really passe about the whole thing. And I was screaming from the rooftops, you have white anarchists burning down black-owned businesses, and we're not going frickin' nuts about it. It's like, this is kind of okay because the larger movement is important. That was what was on TV for an entire year.
And we're frustrated that we have
not even at a year yet. Like,
that we need to have our lives protected, and it's being muddled by people burning down buildings that aren't even doing it in relation to the movement. So believe me, there was unrest about that. There was not a complacency where we were like, this is okay. And I don't really believe that when you look at media, like I don't remember looking at any news saying that, you know, this is cool, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah. Now I will say that I took issue with lots of people saying, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, let's go, keep it going about the events of the Capitol. And also when you say screaming from rooftops, you have had a position that what happened on the 6th was not a direct issue of Trump. I will give you that. But I feel that you still agree that what happened was wrong. And what we've seen since the 6th is the majority of people is like, what happened on the 6th is wrong. Regardless of who was responsible, who incited it, it was wrong. The problem that we had is that When we brought up the issue of the police violence, it became an argument about rioting and looting and burning businesses down. But the question is, why is that happening?
The
Because
root
of the
cause
issue that we
versus
were complaining
symptoms.
about, which completely got pushed to the side. We're not even having that conversation. Kaepernick sits on the field. He takes a knee. It's not about why is he taking a knee because of police brutality. It's he's disrespecting the flag. And then that's carried on to now on the 6th, where the disrespect to our nation is being justified. And when you say CNN is saying it's okay or it's passe, I see the passe nature of what happened on the 6th, and I feel that what happened on the 6th was much more dangerous than the civil unrest in our communities, because we're literally talking about unseating an elected official, the president of the United States, to seat someone in his place that lost the election. That is literally a dictatorship.
That's not,
Because if you put him in
not
office,
what that march is about.
it's not what it was about.
That's not what that march is about.
They were chanting "Stop the Steal."
What does it have to do with unseating a winner?
You want to stop the
You
steal
want
that
to
you
steal
feel
the
happened.
presidency
You would
from
have to
the
then
elected
unseat
person.
Biden as the winner to put Trump in office. If your goal is to put Trump
Nope.
back in office, that's not
Nope.
that was not the goal.
Nope.
They wanted to have the votes. That
Then why
put
did they
Biden
have Trump
in office.
flags?
I don't understand
Trump
that.
t-shirts.
What was the goal?
There,
Just answer that.
from a Trump supporter's perspective, I'll put it right out there. I believe this election was an outright fraud. And when a lot of people hear that, they say, man, you're crazy. You're crazy. There was no widespread fraud. I agree. There was no widespread fraud. There was not traditional voter fraud in this election. Vernon, you made a comment this week that in this nation, we have rules for our elections, and they're established by our legislatures, and we follow them. And we live but with the consequences, right?
Yeah, I believe that this, to be specific, I said there's 50 secretaries. First, if we go all the way down, there's this thing called the 10th Amendment that gives states' rights. And states' rights lend itself to how states run things like elections. And I believe that there are 50 secretaries of states. Then we have Washington, D.C. There are elected officials that are charged with overseeing the election process. And from there, they go through every state constitutional method of making sure that the election is authentic and that the election results are consistent and that nobody was disenfranchised, especially when the decisions or when the election results are determined, that those are the most accurate results. Is there error? Absolutely.
So let me give you a quick by Pennsylvania specifically. Pennsylvania has a state constitution that is extremely clear on when is it okay to accept an absentee ballot and when it is not. And Pennsylvania state legislature has on multiple times tried to pass through normal procedures what we have here in Michigan, no reason absentee. They've passed it several times, and the Pennsylvania state courts have said you must actually change the Constitution to do this. The Pennsylvania state constitution does not allow this. So in previous cycles, when their legislature would pass no reason absentee or things like it, their state courts would step in and say, you have violated the state constitution, that is off the books. This cycle, the Pennsylvania state legislature goes through and passes no reason absentee again. The Republicans in the Pennsylvania legislature bring a case to the state Supreme, and ultimately in the state Supreme Court, saying, here we go again, they're doing it again, we're not okay with this, it's against the state constitution. But this cycle, their state Supreme Court says, you're here too early, you've not yet been harmed. They go ahead.
I got a question.
So they're treating this cycle differently. That's our complaint. You go post-election, and the complaint comes in and says, now we've been harmed. Your state constitution says that you're not allowed to run elections like this.
Okay.
And they say, and now it's dismissed for latches. It's dismissed for coming too late. When you sue before, it's too early. When you sue after, it's too late. There are 300 such cases around this country where the election laws that bipartisan legislatures agreed on ahead of the election were changed after the first vote had been counted. Please let me finish, and I'll make it quick, when any party changes the rules, it brings into play credible accusations of bias. And that is where not trusting elections comes from. We should all agree that the rules for elections must be cast ahead of the election, before the first vote is cast. We can't have state attorney generals, secretaries of states, judges overruling the legislature after votes have been cast, or you're going to have millions of people, maybe tens of millions of people, that believe the election was a fraud.
But would you
I got you. But I think it's a difference in fraud.
if
Sorry,
you
John.
would cite COVID for that?
That's the only thing I'm so confused about. Johnny, you're sitting. We act as if this was done, and in Pennsylvania, Heinz Field was packed with fans for football games. We act as if these decisions that were made were not predicated on us being in the middle of the worst pandemic in over a century. And whether you believe it or not.
Vernon, these legislatures got together and changed their rules for a single session for COVID. They contemplated COVID. Bipartisan legislatures contemplated COVID. And things that they could not get through their legislatures were achieved in many cases through the actions of state attorney generals, secretaries of states, and judges. This is not a case of COVID just came along. These Congresses had special sessions specifically to change their rules for COVID, and you still had people acting outside the legislature, enacting rule changes that could not get passed by the legislature.
So
that's not a fair way to run an election.
I understand. So I got a question, because you deal with our Lake Orion community and politics and everything, and I don't like looking at other places, because this is where I say it's inconsistent. Because
Michigan runs a fair election. I have no complaints about Michigan.
That's where my issue is, because I with all due respect, Jocelyn Benson is my Secretary of State, and Michigan, and this is also about the argument. If Michigan was fair, but you hear from the president that Michigan was not, because
I have complaints about Michigan, but the margin in Michigan is 150,000.
Right.
I don't have 150,000 complaints in Michigan.
All right, but then when you have a Republican governor that voted for Donald Trump and a Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, that's where the inconsistencies of the rhetoric of fraud come. And then I'll say this.
Also don't have a problem with Georgia. Georgia had a smaller margin. So my complaint with Georgia is Stacey Abrams loses that election, has a major, I'm going to say at least semi-credible complaint. Minimum semi-credible complaint. The election is certified for Kemp, and Stacey Abrams she doesn't take a back seat for long. She gets to work. However, think of it in the context of laws and procedures. How our government is supposed to run. Stacey Abrams then enters a consent decree with the governor of Georgia. So you have an unelected person making a consent decree with the governor of Georgia to change election law. They made an agreement on how to compare signatures. That's outside the legislature, and you cannot expect people to not have a problem with that.
But it still goes back to what you're saying, opposite of Pennsylvania. That was bipartisan agreements.
Oh, so as long as it's bipartisan to violate the Constitution, it's good?
You just said hold Pennsylvania's bipartisan agreements and understandings to the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
You just said that, but then when it happens in Georgia, it's fishy. But this is where I say it's inconsistent.
A private citizen
why does this
working with the governor is not bipartisan. Bipartisanship would be your legislature.
Agree. Okay. But what I'm saying is, so why are we not reviewing and questioning Florida? Why are we not reviewing and questioning Texas? Why are we not reviewing and questioning New York? And I get you're going to say because the wide margin of victories in those places. But the problem I have is if something was array in Michigan, if something was array in Wisconsin, if something was array in Pennsylvania, it must also be array in New York, in California, in Washington. And the way I say, I'll say this as a leader. It's funny. I talk to parents all the time. I promise I do this all the time. Parents dispute any form of student discipline for their child on the day that they receive the consequence. So I'm going to bring up just real quick. student gets a detention for tardiness. Do you know the tardy that they always talk about or try to excuse? It's the last one, the one that led to the consequence. So they say, hey, on that day, this is the reason why they were tardy, this the week, whatever. But they don't mention the other 5 tardies before the 6 that led to the consequence. So I understand what you're saying, but in order to be fraud, you are just explaining how Pennsylvania did something that made you question them. Georgia did something completely different. Michigan, you said, was fair. Wisconsin is something else. And it just doesn't even follow any suit of Ocean's 11 logic that
No, Vernon,
things have to
Vernon,
happen
I started out by
simultaneously.
saying I don't believe there was a widespread conspiracy. I think states acting on their own had an effect on the election. In
Then
Wisconsin,
you got a real 10th Amendment issue.
I agree. Texas sued 6 states. 18 states signed on to the
10th
legislation.
Amendment, throw that shit out. It's ruined COVID from 50
Okay.
states determining their reaction. It's ruined elections. 10th Amendment, we are advocating to ruin that. We only care about First and Second Amendment. Scratch all
Say
that.
that. Let's say Texas is poised to go blue.
Hey,
Let's imagine
yeah,
next
I'm sorry.
election Texas is poised to go blue. And let's imagine that their Republican governor and Republican secretary of state skip the legislature and put their finger on the scale and do something that credibly affects a tight election. And let's say that Texas courts, because it's been read for so long, are packed with enough Republican-friendly judges that nobody inside the state of Texas will rule it illegal. 49 states don't have a problem with that?
I'm only saying, I'm not disagreeing with you for that anecdote, that metaphor.
That's what I feel Pennsylvania did.
But
that's what I feel Wisconsin
But
did.
then Georgia discredits that, and here's where maybe it's different.
Georgia's unrelated.
It's unrelated when it comes to you talking about.
No, Georgia just had a hotly disputed election between Kemp and Abrams, and went and did the hard work to tighten up their election process. That's why I said I trust Georgia.
Okay.
Florida, after 2000, changed their election process. They said, we must conduct elections that the public trusts. We must do a better job. I saw on your on the last episode, Vernon, you were talking about Georgia and how Republicans are winning all night, and then Atlanta comes in, and of course Atlanta's better. You know what I think might go a long way to have Republicans trusting these elections a bit more? If Atlanta didn't wait to report 100% of their votes after every single other vote had come in. I'm not saying that that's fraudulent, but on the screen, when you're watching these elections come across, a lot of these communities, a lot of these cities are reporting 3,000, 10,000 votes at a time. Atlanta says we're doing it different. We do it different. We report all of our votes in one tranche, and they reported 191,000 votes at one time. I'm not saying that's fraudulent, but that's one thing that Florida outlawed. Florida said every community, every municipality must count their votes in the same way and under the same rules to get rid of this, accusations of vote dumping or accusations. It looked like the big cities were waiting until they knew how many votes they needed, and they always got just a little more than they needed. Appearances. I'm not talking about real fraud. I'm not talking about real fraud.
That makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense when I'm talking about volume of votes. Like, I'm just being honest.
I agree.
I
agree. Mathematically, it doesn't make a difference. Mathematically, it doesn't.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, this is not new when we're talking about things. This happened literally in Michigan, in Wayne County in 2016. People were holding their fingers like this for Wayne County to come in and push Hillary Clinton over the edge, and it didn't. So this has happened. So people complaining about it now goes back to Johnny's point. It has nothing to do with the process.
Yes,
it has nothing to do with the reporting. It
does.
has everything to do with the outcome.
Yes, it does.
No. I didn't see these.
You've got about 7 states that run. You've got about 7 states that run great elections. You've got about 7 states that run great elections. The 5 on the West Coast that have figured out how to do universal mail-in, and they had a lot of problems getting that figured out. But I think 5 states on the West Coast have that figured out, and you have Florida and Georgia that run really tight elections. The other 43 states could learn a hell of a lot from those states to run tighter elections.
That's fine.
And that would go a
doesn't make it
long
fraud.
way. That'd go a long way to batting down some of these wild conspiracy theories.
That means it hurts my feelings. I don't like the targeting penalty in college football. When I see a kid get a targeting penalty in the national semifinal and in the national championship game that benefits Ohio State, I don't really like it because it benefited Ohio State. But that has nothing to do with fraud. You specifically said fraud. You don't like how elections operate. You think they could be better.
But I'm just looking
I was
at
speaking specifically to you saying that Georgia disproved anything. Georgia runs a good election. It doesn't disprove anything that Pennsylvania did weird.
I'm with you.
like where we're coming back and forth with that as far as like a template for our direction of how we feel it went. I just asked the question that kind of bleeds across all of that. So given your perspective on Pennsylvania, for example, and what they did to change the procedure and how that led to complications and people expecting or thinking that there was fraud. My question in regards to that would be, given the context of last year, the fact that we were in a pandemic, and regardless of your belief system on how easy it is to get or how dangerous it is, we have to know that there are people that would choose not to want to vote in person if they didn't have to because of the fact that it was a prevalent situation. And most people are afraid of this virus more than others because of the fact that you don't feel sick and you get others sick before you all realize that you're sick. So it stands to reason that people would opt to vote absentee based on that, given the climate of where we were last year. Now, again, I understand what you're saying in terms of the procedure and the way they handled it, where that was questionable, possibly, let's say, illegal. However, we are then basically making the statement that due to that action, the votes that came in could have potentially been tampered or diluted, but we also have to take into account that maybe that did not happen and the votes that we got were the votes that they were. It's just people chose to vote via satellite as opposed to going physically to the polls due to COVID. So when you say a reason absentee ballot, I feel like there was a reason. I don't want to potentially get this virus just to go vote, and I don't have to. So
I completely get that. Now let's go a little further down the rabbit hole. Pennsylvania further has a law that says that you cannot peek inside those ballots. You cannot pre-canvass those ballots before 9 a.m. on election day. We find out post-election that 2 counties, the 2 most heavily Democrat counties in the state, were pre-canvassing ballots and reaching out to voters to help them fix those ballots. I'm not going to stand here and say that somebody who forgot to sign their ballot or somebody who put the wrong address or only got 1 witness instead of 2. I'm not going to die on the hill where we say, let's throw out those ballots. However, the other counties didn't do that. So rural voters in Republican counties that had secretaries, that had clerks who were following the law, did not pre-canvass their ballots and help their voters cure them. And when you have a tight election, that starts to matter. And then I start to wonder, and I'll take it back to the beginning. Then I start to wonder if the most heavily Democratic counties in the state of Pennsylvania were illegally pre-canvassing their ballots, were illegally opening them before election day. Were they looking inside them and elbowing their buddies in the state legislature and the Secretary of State and saying, hey, we got a problem here. A lot of people didn't put the privacy envelope on. Hey, we got a problem here. A lot of people only got 1 witness signature, not 2. Hey, we got a problem here. Because a lot of these laws that came outside the legislative process happen to match just perfectly the kinds of things that first-time absentee ballot users do. And the one mathematical statistic I would point to is if you look at 2016, 2018, a general election and primaries, you have rejected ballots that are illegal. They're missing enough things that the law says these ballots don't count. The percentage of ballots rejected in Pennsylvania was on the order of 2.5 to 3.1%, 2.6 to 3.1%. What was it during COVID? When you had record numbers of people filling out ballots for the first time? Absentee ballots aren't all that easy. We need to make it easier to fill them out. They're currently not all that easy to fill out. A bunch of first-timers nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. Only 0.3% of ballots were illegal, were rejected.
So in the two
So where
counties
was
that
this energy at when he had 70 times to prove that there was voter fraud and 70 cases filed that were all thrown out across the nation? Where was all this
Well,
evidence supported for that?
Well, if you want
But I think,
to say,
Stacey,
that
I
Trump's
think,
lawyers
I
were
don't think,
terrible, I will agree with you. But Trump did not file 70 suits. I'm not going to count all the weirdo rando people that filed BS suits in
right.
that count.
I
Trump
think
was
what
0 for
Andy
6.
is saying, Stacey, Andy isn't saying, I think it's kind of like defund police. What I'm gleaming from you, I could be completely wrong, Andy. You use the word fraud, but what you are saying is practices were inconsistent that can drive people to believe in inaccuracies.
Correct.
that's what I get from you as well. So if you take those two counties and let's say based on that information, because if they, looked in the balance and it's illegal and they're not supposed to, that's a valid concern that is validated. So if we were to say strike those from the record, do you feel that in doing so we would have what is reported via Trump, the landslide victory for him? If we were to actually take that account, because one thing I will tell you now, like what a lot of people will say is that there's no evidence, we haven't seen any evidence. You are giving a credible scenario of where justifiably votes could have been struck from the record based on the fact that they were illegal, just based on their act. So if we were to do that, do you feel honestly that there would have been enough of those occurrences to sway the election in a landslide for Donald Trump?
Without a doubt.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I'll give the most concrete example I'll give because it's really quick. Wisconsin allows absentee ballots. Wisconsin requires voter ID to come in with your absentee ballot. That's one of their rules. They give an exception if you're indefinitely confined. If you're indefinitely confined, they say check this box and away you go. I don't have the number in front of me. I'll grab it. I tried to do a quick search as you were asking that question. But in a normal election cycle, Wisconsin has something on the order of 10 to 12,000 people statewide making this claim. You had secretaries of states in the Milwaukee district instructing people clerks. Thank you. You had clerks in the Milwaukee district advising people on their Twitter account to just select that box. Their state Supreme Court, if they didn't have ID, just check that box and they wouldn't have to give ID. The Wisconsin State Supreme Court reprimanded that Milwaukee's clerk and said, take that tweet down, that you're advising people to violate the law. How many ballots came in this cycle? I'll look up the exact number, but it's on the order of, they normally have 10,000, and this time they had 210,000. It's roughly in those neighborhoods. And you had Wisconsin decided by 10,400 votes? Yes, Johnny, I do think that these process violations, if properly researched, if properly vetted, would result in a Trump landslide. And the complaint from a lot of Trump supporters, particularly ones on January 6th, is that this was never heard. This was never, no court docketed cases for fact finding. No court ever docketed a case for discovery.
Other than in Your Honor on Stars, when does the court have to go find information? When does the court have to go find evidence? When does the court have to investigate things?
No. The trials have phases. Lawsuits have phases.
I fully understand. When does the court
none
have
of these,
to find these
the court does. Well, here's a major frustration that I'm hoping can be worked on before future elections. You can ask Al Gore. The clock runs out. The Constitution has certain hard dates that you just can't get around.
Right.
And at some point, cases become moot. Whether you were right or wrong, things are certified and things just move along. A legitimate court case can't actually unfold between November 6th and December 14th.
I'm with you. I follow that. I agree with that. But then that kind of circles us back to you put someone in place to validate things before, during, and after. It's called a Secretary of State. But I don't
put people in place to rubber stamp things. None of these people have any. The Secretary of State doesn't have discretion to reject. Okay. You get certifications coming from smaller districts all the way up, and everybody's just rubber stamping stuff.
Okay, so here's my question, and I know you're going to agree with this. then that same energy in fact finding and statistics that you're going to pull up, you're going to equally pull up South Dakota for me. You're going to equally pull up Wyoming for me.
Man, it's a nationwide problem. You had Pelosi after certification in 2017. Let me pull up her exact quote because, man, it'd be pretty easy to confuse this with a Trump tweet. The number 3 in power for the entire United States, Speaker of the House, says, quote, "Our election was hijacked. There is no question. Congress has a duty to hashtag protect our democracy and hashtag follow the facts."
Can you tell me what Hillary did?
7.5 million votes will be turned over to Trump if we went all the way down and we found these fraud and these inconsistencies. It would turn over 7.5 million votes to award Trump the presidency, is what you're convinced, Andy, if I'm understanding you correctly.
7.5.
Well, we don't have a popular vote system, and that's not news to anybody.
Okay.
No. That's the popular vote. I'm giving you I'm not talking about the 74 electoral votes that Biden won by. I'm talking about the 7.5 million popular votes that he won by. That's what you're saying is the fraud. You're saying that if we went through all these different counties and these where there's inconsistencies are at in the state, that if we actually investigated and made it a very much so uniform across the board where you couldn't have these policies coming up and these inconsistencies, it would turn over 7.5 million votes to award President Trump.
No, I'm saying
Not turn them over.
it would turn over more than 11,000 in Wisconsin. It would turn over more than 100,000 in Pennsylvania.
More than 100,000
in Pennsylvania.
So 20 electoral votes from Pennsylvania, and then is it 9 or 10 in
I believe
Wisconsin?
they've got 11.
Because even if that happened, he would still win.
I believe they've got 11.
He would still be over the 270.
Oh, absolutely. And I brought this up in the context of last Wednesday. I'm okay with Biden being sworn in. I'm okay with that.
But not those people that was on the Capitol on January 6th.
But I'm talking to their motive. I'm talking to their motives. As a Trump supporter, these arguments have not been heard in any court. Courts are throwing these cases out, saying the president of the United States, as a political figure, doesn't have standing in this case. Other courts are saying this case was filed too late; it should have been filed before the election. Cases are being tossed out on procedural grounds and not getting to the phase of the trial, the phase of the lawsuit, where there's discovery and where there's fact finding. And that leaves an empty feeling for people with my complaints. Now, I personally think it's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but I'm not going to begrudge somebody if they think Georgia's in the mix as well. And the hopes and prayers of Trump supporters were penned on that day and the 2 hours of debate that the U.S. Constitution permits anytime that a senator signs a House of Representative members objection. And we had senators signing House of Representative members objections, and the people who went down there had fingers crossed on a long shot that in that 2 hours of debate, there'd be enough clear evidence to give 10
evidence.
Big request. The big request was not to overturn the election. Was not to overturn the election. The big request was, could enough questions and doubt be raised to give 10 more days for states to recertify?
The steal it's not constitutional. You were literally asking to throw out the Constitution. No, the process.
The Constitution allows for 2 hours of debate.
Yes, but the Constitution doesn't allow 10 days.
Unless
the
Congress agrees. Congress agrees.
They're literally asking for it to be 85 and sunny in Michigan on January 1st.
It was a long shot.
Okay.
Of course. But my question to that would be then, if we were hoping for a long shot and we wanted the process to play out to see if we could be heard and let's say possibly get that 10 days, I don't understand then why a gaggle of people wearing Trump paraphernalia would impede that process, which results in the senators having to go into a bunker and stop the proceedings. Because what we were being told prior to that day was what Vernon loves to recite: stay tuned. This was supposed to be the day where those objectives January 6th, and it would be tabulated and potentially recognized, and they didn't allow that to happen. They literally impeded that process.
I think it was a terrible decision.
You know, so
Yeah, I found it odd as well.
that's what hurts us when we try. I
I
want
like that.
a bit of the doubt.
We're going the way we want. Breaking the doors down. I don't get it. Just
We-
let things carry on.
we did not get a single thing we wanted when those jackasses decided to
Yeah.
discredit and derail our entire movement. And I know, I gather that some people don't like when I make comparisons to the social justice movement that happened all summer, but I bet you had a similar feeling when some other jackasses did actions that discredited and stole your momentum as well.
Well, here's the difference between that, and it's to be absolutely honest. Now, this is coming from me having a father that would have been 90 years old yesterday, that grew up in Mobile, Alabama, in the heart of Jim Crow South, in the heart of racially divided South. I can't go with my mother and my father. My mother is 73 years old, and she lived through the Detroit riots in the 60s and things like that. I can't go with the things I know and compare those anywhere near equally. That's the hard part. Is my mother taught me about Emmett Till when I was a young child. Like I can't dismiss Emmett Till's mother giving him a open casket burial so that the country could see that. I can't dismiss, and that's why I always mention things. Bessie Burton did a phenomenal job of teaching me about Black history and social justice and things like that. And I'm blessed enough, I post it all the time. I met Rosa Parks multiple times just because she lived down the street. Like I'm blessed in that way. So I can't go with my interactions and my education on the atrocities that have happened to people that look like me in America and then say that something parallels that. It just doesn't exist.
We're doing it again. That's not what I said.
No, I'm not. No, but what I'm saying is when we move into the voice of the social justice movement, and I'm on, you know me, I'm never going to break a window. I'm never going to do the.
I don't think there was anything. I don't think there was anyone like you lighting buildings on fire.
But hold on. But let me be very clear. It gets to a point where even though I think, I'll make it easy. Following the process to get the message out the right way over and over, and watching George Zimmerman walk away free, and watching no charges be brought forth in the Eric Gardner situation, and knowing what happened to Elijah McClain, and knowing what happened to Breonna Taylor, at some point, I'm doing things the right way. I'm sending my emails. I'm contacting my state rep. I'm doing things right. It is not showing me that doing the right things leads to the right outcome.
Right.
And that's where I think there's a difference, because what happened last week at the Capitol wasn't a look at this continuously happening.
Let me
That we think we move past.
let me say that a different way, because
Yeah.
I think for a second time a comparison to other protests that were treated differently in the media was received the wrong way. I'll say it a different way. Those people who took American flags and batons and beat out windows at the Congress, those weren't the first windows they ever busted out. Those are professional jackasses who may have very well been wearing the same black clothing minus a Trump bumper sticker and busted out windows in Atlanta and Milwaukee.
Well, I think here's where I think it's different, and this is going back to how we started.
There's too much attention to the jerks.
Right, but this is where I think there's difference, and I've said this. One time, I had a friend from college. She posted a picture. She's big time against lockdowns for COVID, all of these other things. She posted a picture with a Fox News panelist that was at a protest of a gym wanted to be open during lockdowns in New Jersey or wherever she lives, and she takes a picture with him. And I said, do you understand in the back of the picture that you just posted on Facebook that there is an alt-right flag in the background of your picture and a Confederate flag in the background of your picture. So I said, I understand your pride in you seeing this celebrity and you want to get it on Facebook, but do you understand that if for the moment I see it, your message is blurred? And that's what you're talking about, Andy. Your message is blurred. Well, if you have that understanding, Dennis, Johnny, Stacy, myself, understand that messages can be blurred, then why, even in Michigan state capital of Lansing, do I see Trump flags synonymous with American flags, synonymous with Blue Lives Matter flags, synonymous with a Confederate flag? So I can't find one time where don't bring your Confederate flags and speak for us. Don't bring your Blue Lives Matter flag next to your Confederate flag. Don't blur our message. And that would come from me. And
Have you
as
seen videos of Trump supporters trying to tackle the people who are breaking those windows and telling them this isn't us? This isn't us. You shouldn't do this.
But
You want me to send you videos? You want me to send you videos of Trump supporters telling people wearing Nazi jackets and swastikas at Trump rallies to get the hell out of here? I can send you videos of Trump supporters not putting up with things that you feel Trump supporters are too comfortable with. We're not cool with that crap either.
No, I'm with you. I'm not saying the all thing, but I don't care about Andy telling somebody to not bring that to the message. But the president of the United States sees the same images I do. And I've never seen the energy to talk about
both sides. And
Well, if I saw things exactly your way, I'd probably vote more like you. I think we see different things.
But it's the root cause. You got to address the root cause. That's the difference. The difference is the root cause. The root cause of these different frames. It's a different lens. It's like we're all watching the same video footage, but we have different lenses. I'm, as a Black African-American woman, you and I, Andy, will never have the same lens, unfortunately, because I'm not blessed with that luxury. So here's what we see. So when you look at the root cause of the social justice movements over the summer, the root cause is systemic racism, suppression, right? Unjust. That's the root cause. When you look at what we saw on January 6th, the root cause was you felt like you were entitled to an election where the American people have voted and decided, and y'all couldn't provide concrete proof that it should be another way. And your president told you so. Your president said to you hours before that, what we're going to do is we're going to march up to the Capitol and we're going to talk and we're going to encourage and we're going to tell these elected officials that represent you to do their job and do what's right for America. We're going to take our country back. We're going to take our building back. What do you mean? We're all U.S. citizens. We all technically vote for you guys to work for us. It's not your building. It's not your country. It's not. That's not what it is.
If you show me that he said we're going to take our building,
to stand up and do something.
But you can't compare those.
You show me that he said let's go take that building, I'll vote for his impeachment myself. He didn't say that.
I'm saying these are words that came out from his supporters. Like they detracted what he said. They said, okay, he said go march up there and tell them how we feel. Let's go do it. This is what we're gonna say. They literally took what he said and transformed it and did what they did.
He said, let's go march up to the Capitol, peaceful and patriotic, and make our voices heard. And then the very next thing he said was, aren't these police officers great? Wouldn't it be great if they could march with us? They're wonderful. We love our police officers. 5 minutes later, 45 minutes. 5 minutes later, 45 minutes away, a Capitol police officer is being beat with an American flag. And the way it's treated, like those two dots are this close together and can be drawn, a straight line can be drawn between them with no other thought. 45 minutes away, a police officer gets beaten with an American flag. And I don't see how you can look at the same things Trump has always been saying, fight for your country. Fight for your country.
Well, we're fighting to live
2 hours
country.
before.
That's the difference.
There should be a trial by combat.
Fighting to live.
2 hours before.
I hear you, and I agree with you.
So I'll say it like this. I'm a head football coach. I don't call the offense, defense, or special teams. My defensive coordinator says we are about to impose our will. We are about to hit everything moving, and we start to get personal fouls for late hits, we start to get personal fouls for dirty play, I put my defensive coordinator in position to speak to my team that way. I know that as a head coach. And what you're saying is the president of the United States didn't know that Rudy Giuliani was going to mention, I agree with you. 45 minutes later from when he said that, something happened. 2 hours before, his son gave rhetoric. 2.5 hours before, Rudy Giuliani gave rhetoric. 2 weeks before, he posted things to come to D.C. and not let the steal happen. Stop the steal. That doesn't say stop the steal with your political power of emailing. Stop the steal with your political power of putting pressure on your elected officials. It doesn't exist that way. So I agree with you. If we completely remove responsibility, then we must also give the same power to what you need to do in advance. If you're going to take one sentence, march down the Capitol right now, then he's full of shit when he said, I'll be with you. He specifically said, I will be with you. So
Nowhere
which
to be
part
found.
is the truth?
Now hold on. I'm a little confused. I'm a little confused because it's all too convenient when you take him literally versus when you say his rhetoric is just kind of between the lines and code reading.
Literally, because he means what he says, unapologetically.
You said he's unapologetic. He's not presidential. He's going to spit whatever he wants to say.
I apologize. I've seen your name on Facebook as Doc. How do you prefer to be addressed?
Oh, just call me Stacy.
Stacy?
Sexy. Call her sexy.
Single, ready to mingle.
Stacy,
Trying to say, you sound like Amanda said.
Hey, for viewers of difficult discussions, I'm the only one with my whiskey. Everybody else got water.
this is not water.
And if people say that you can't connect socially during a pandemic, evidence proven that you can. Stop it, people.
This isn't water.
Some of that.
Stacey, when you were doing your best Trump impression just a moment ago, you said that Trump said, we're going to take that building. I agreed with everything you said till then. And a complaint I have about Trump is that it's too convenient to take his words literally sometimes when he's joking around and to read between the lines other times when that's convenient.
Right.
He did not say, let's agree, he did not say take the building, correct?
Correct. He didn't say take the building. I'm being, I'm being
To take your country back, which is pretty generic language.
But
yeah, I embellished that part, but he did say we have to be strong and we do need to, this is for our country, we must fight. He said that you have to be strong.
To save time, I won't read a huge list of politicians saying that for the last 250 years. That is very vanilla political language.
But no.
It's,
but Andy,
it's the
what I
context
say is,
of how he said it. You can follow how he said it. The way he said it,
Okay.
it's just how he said it.
No, Andy, I won't agree with that. I understand it wholeheartedly, but I will not agree with that. No bullshit. Dennis, I went to his CrossFit gym partnership. Like, Dennis is a hell of a coach. If Dennis tells me to work on something, I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna believe Dennis. I'm gonna listen to. I'm going to drink from the fountain of his words. It's just like I say about tattoos, barbershops, everything. I'm never getting a tattoo from somebody that's not inked up. My barber, Ezekiel Moore, his hair is always crispy. I'm not going to a barbershop with somebody that doesn't have a good haircut. I understand what you are saying, but it is lost in the fact that when he says it, the magnitude of his words are completely different than what you're saying. I'll be honest. If Barack Obama said the exact same thing, it would be received completely different. I don't know if we agree.
He would be called a terrorist if he said it.
But beyond, I'm not even talking about how it's responded to. I'm talking about how people receive it.
Barack Obama
I'm saying
stood in front of a Latino audience and called Republicans our enemy. Joe Biden stood in front of a black audience and said, if you elect Mitt Romney of all people, they're going to put y'all back in chains. This
Okay,
rhetoric,
even after that.
this rhetoric did not start with Trump.
That's where I'm not talking about the rhetoric. I'm talking about the receiver now. I'm not talking about the microphone. I'm talking about the receiver.
Do you at least kind of understand where the F your feelings thing came from?
I totally get where Andrew's coming from. Where Andrew's coming from is a position of where we are right now with the impeachment. Like, he is giving the validation of why it probably wouldn't go through officially, like, when it's investigated, even if they're allowed the time to do so. He is providing foundation as to why we can't hold that as an impeachable offense, and I'll give him credence for that, because that is a fair argument to make, and that's an argument that's going to be made. I guess the other side of that is that where your argument supports where impeachment and what he did is not necessarily unbecoming of a president, the argument that Vernon is making is on a different plane, I feel, whereas this is on a, I'm coming to court with my paperwork, this is what happened here, what he did was not wrong based on these facts, and that's a fair argument to make. However, where the argument is not meeting together is that Vernon is taking issue with the popular standing of Donald Trump's actions in relation to how people perceive it. And I am one person who will say I should not be responsible for what other people do, especially if they infer my words a certain way. Like, I support the Second Amendment, and I say very pro Second Amendment things. And if people, for whatever reason, take what I'm saying and decide to take up arms because they believe that much in me and do something that's an atrocity, that's not my fault. However, if I am in a position of influence over the nation and that atrocity occurs, I have to take a stance where there is no question that I don't support it. And he did make a statement where he said that it was wrong, and he said that we need to have peace. But where I question it is just before his tweets were suspended, he tells that same group of people, go home, you are very special, we love you. And that's where I question that, okay, now I question whether or not your statement that was done on White House paper, did you even write it? Do you believe it?
No.
That's where I question, because your personal actions, via your mouthpiece, on social media, don't really line up to that. So if I see
Johnny, if I can ask you directly, you're very strong 2A.
I am.
Oh, whoa!
I just met Johnny 48 hours ago.
Oh my goodness!
Hey Johnny, if I can put you on the spot, is the purpose of the Second Amendment? Is this purpose of the Second Amendment target shooting and hunting, or is it ultimately to protect us against a potentially tyrannical government?
You literally just changed this.
No,
we don't have till midnight.
Johnny will talk about this for a long time.
No, because I'm going to tell you. Because Johnny, I'm going to tell you right now, I believe it's the latter. And live on TV, I was damn proud of those people. It took me several days to say, you know what, that was pretty stupid.
Well, yes, I agree that the Second Amendment's purpose is for defense, not for food
I disagree.
or sport.
I disagree. I believe it's for use on our politicians should they become tyrannical.
You are defending yourself against the tyranny, correct?
I understand what you're saying.
It's our strongest check against a potentially tyrannical government. I'm a very strong Second Amendment believer as well. And from that stance, I was proud of the people in the Capitol. I was proud of the people in the Capitol that day. It took me several days to dial it back and go, you know what? They screwed us over. That was really short-sighted and dumb.
Mm-hmm.
I say that in relation to Trump's tweet that day.
Okay, so and that's where I think when I'm trying to have this communication here, I'm trying to take the arguments that are at play, and I want to bring them on the same level so that we can move forward. But if one argument's here and the other argument to rebut it is here, it's hard for us to move forward because we're never connecting. So that's all I'm trying to do, is that I see where you're coming from 100%, and I do believe that you have firm ground where even if Trump let's say, was still going to be president for 100 days, that impeachment process probably would not succeed, even if it wasn't due to, I'm a Republican, so I'm not going to impeach him, just on the facts. Like you said, what he said and how he said it, you can't make a case to prove that Donald Trump said anything to drive those people to do it.
The criminal
did not tell them to go
charge from the House was incitement, and the Brandenburg v. Ohio case makes very clear. That was a 9-0 Supreme Court case where a flat-out racist was calling on a crowd to go kill black people. And a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling laid out 3 rules for incitement. They're very clear. Incitement wasn't committed here.
And I agree where you're coming from with that. And I just want to know that, in your response to what Vernon is saying, that you see that where Vernon is coming from is not necessarily from a court-based argument or a court-based feeling. He has issue with the way Trump has handled
a political disagreement.
His message that he provides to his people, or the American people, because his message is given to everyone, not just the people that support him. He talks to everybody.
If it's not a legal argument, it's a political argument, and the political consequence of doing stupid things is to not be reelected. And to that point, Trump's already faced that problem. However,
but he hasn't accepted it.
However, I love when Democrats do really unpopular things. Impeachment currently polls at 60% opposition, 40% support. So in that regard, have at it. Go nuts.
Okay,
But that's
just
a
saying,
political game.
If we're going to talk
our conversation
politics, that's the political take.
All right. So you understand where Vernon is coming from, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's bad politics.
Okay.
If somebody's making a political argument for impeachment, that's bad politics.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to breed cohesion. That's all. So go ahead, Vernon. You have something to say.
Well, I think a slight segue was kind of made, and I know we had a second topic, and I got to get Dennis up in this. I love Dennis there. But I think, especially it's almost 10 o'clock. Yeah. We won't talk Second Amendment.
No, not today.
Whatever. But, wow. I had to swallow.
Is that tears you wiping, Vernon, from laughing?
Hey, no, that was a big spoonful of shit.
Not Vernon, but the one.
Like, and I'm not saying like bad shit. I'm just saying I took a heaping spoonful of all that was said about what the Second Amendment's for.
When someone tells me they love 2A, I want to know how much they love it.
Right. All right. Whew. Man.
Met his match. Johnny met his match right there.
Whatever. So the one thing that has happened in the past week is after social media and apps have noticed what they deem are violations of their policies, they have taken Donald Trump down. And the big argument has come with, is that a violation of the First Amendment? And or is it fair that he is being taken down? I even had a college teammate that said that there's an imbalance of right-leaning voices on social media being muted for the left, and that is inconsistent. My argument is, as a rule maker in my practice, other people breaking rules is not a defense of the rule that you broke. So if I'm driving and I don't care what type of feeling I have towards the officer, if it is a 70-mile-an-hour highway, the moment that I go 71, I am in violation of the speed limit. My defense can no longer be, it's others that did it, it's inconsistently practiced and things like that. And we talk about it with like social justice because we see that a lot. So it's hard for me to say that. But especially when it comes to entities such as social media platforms, I've been real confused at his voice being muted and him not being able to use a public free platform that has defined guidelines. So that's where I'm lost, because porn
Surely
stars
you meant
get-
private platform, not public platform.
Right,
That'd be
I'm sorry, private
pretty.
platform.
That'd be a pretty
Private
tough
platform.
misspeak.
Private platforms where you are utilizing someone else's service. I'm utilizing their podium,
So you got to agree to the terms and conditions.
and
of
I have to
utilizing
agree
it.
to stuff. But
Mhm.
now it's an issue of I'm being muted when I still have, in my opinion, the most prestigious podium offered to me
Press conference at any time.
to do whatever I want. That's where I'm lost. That's where I'm confused, because I never drank from the water of what Donald Trump tweets. It's
Mhm.
all been bad for me. It's all been childish. I've been more critical of what he said at the podium of the White House than what he has said on Twitter. And I'm not saying I haven't been critical of his tweets. I'm saying I'm more critical of what he has said in the official capacity of the White House and the President of the United States than I am his tweets. So
The last time he spoke from the podium of the White House, the major news networks cut out within 2 minutes of him starting the speech.
that has nothing to do. That doesn't eliminate that he spoke. And this my thing. He still sends out a press release.
Social media is how he can talk directly to people and not require the major news networks to deliver his message.
He still has press release. He still has a message. So if he doesn't have his Twitter and he sends out a definitive message,
The companies would
if he has a definitive,
handle his direct text messages and emails, cut off his service as well.
he has a platform.
And the last time he
No,
spoke
I'm saying the president is,
from that platform, the major news networks cut the feed after 2 minutes.
that's
You
fine.
said the major, but the other news feeds, the minor, were still.
So you're telling me Fox 2 or Fox News cuts his feed? Cuts his feed?
Tell you what, Vernon, we won't agree on this, but can we agree that you'll never ever again accuse the right of living in an echo chamber if you're gonna support pushing us off into an echo chamber?
I don't know what you're talking about because I see
Yeah, you do.
bullshit on my Facebook.
Yeah, you do.
No,
Yeah, you do.
this guy,
If
Dan
we're not allowed,
Mackey,
if
has
our
been
if our
racist
positions
from
are
the
not allowed to be broadcast anywhere, and we're not supposed to not complain about it, then
What
I'm
do you
gonna
mean? Has
say
he gone to-
don't complain if all we ever hear is conservative ideas as we get pushed further and further into a corner and aren't allowed in the public square to give our ideas.
I got a question. What independent thought of Andy Magnus's has been taken down by Facebook?
I don't put a lot on
I'm still
Facebook.
going to wait. What independent thought of Andy Magnus has been taken down by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything? If you can't, that's a yes or no question. That's not an explanation. How many
would you
have
like?
been taken down by Facebook?
How many would you like me to give?
So, has Andy Magnus, because you're smart, you have read through the terms of agreement, right?
I-
You click the button, you say, okay,
I click the button.
got you. That is not saying that they cannot do certain things. So I'm saying,
My accounts on all social media were suspended when I shared the New York Post story of Hunter Biden's laptop, which is proven to be a true story. The social media giants, in the 2 weeks before an election, censored the third largest printed media outlet in the nation,
how about
shut down their
before
Twitter
that,
account,
let's find it.
and shut down anyone who was sharing that story. Are you unaware of conservative ideas being censored prior to Donald Trump being kicked off the social media giants?
There is a guy that says that Michigan State basketball is dog shit and says that Tom Izzo is an idiot and should be strung up, and his social media got taken down. That's not right-leaning. That's not left-leaning. That's a violation of terms of agreement.
Okay.
So, I'm saying this. Let's
Okay,
do an experiment.
but the
You
image
tell
of
me
Kathy
what
Lee
to
Gifford
post.
holding Donald Trump's severed head still exists on Twitter.
Dennis, wait. I'm
She lost
sorry. Why? You just made me laugh.
Yeah, I'm glad we're laughing at least.
There are still images of Obama effigies burning that are still
That's
on
true.
social media.
Harris
Well,
have a voice on social platforms.
I mean, it's still images of Nancy Pelosi being pushed off a cliff.
What's the process to get
Just
something
this
taken
week,
off?
I've seen images of Barack Obama wearing a khaki suit.
Hold on. But what's the process? process to get something taken off social media? I'm confused.
Somebody reports it and
It's
sends it a fact
like
checker.
Got
Post
that
take it down, Vernon. I've posted
is
stuff
Mark
where
Zuckerberg looking at Andy Magnus's Twitter or Facebook? No. Somebody, I'm saying, if all 5 of us are watching each other's social media, you post something inappropriate. I'll say this. I posted a picture, and it just happened today on Facebook. Obviously, I'm left-leaning. Obviously, I am pro-black. I posted a picture of the Omaha, Nebraska lynching of Willie Jones. I might get a message. I posted a picture because I kept telling people, we can't have this discussion without understanding the history. Today on Facebook, I received a notification that my post was removed for violating terms and agreements. I promise you, I'm not making this up. I posted a picture of a lynching in Omaha, Nebraska, of a man accused of rape that was lynched and burned in front of the courthouse in Omaha, Nebraska. For posting that image, Facebook took it down today. I didn't shed a tear about that.
Let me pose a question.
Yes. Dennis is on.
2, 1, do we think it's applied evenly? I don't think so. And 2, is it possible that the Democratic Party is having an influence on big tech, and that influence is quieting or silencing or knocking down 30, 40%, whatever, the ideas of a conservative or Republican? Is it possible? It is totally possible.
I will say it is possible, but I want to mold it differently, if I could. Are members of big tech supporters of the Democratic Party?
Biden has
I
14 big tech executives on his transition team.
Gotcha. So, if I don't think that the Democratic Party had a meeting with big tech, big pharma, big government, whatever. I don't think that there was a meeting in the room where it happened. I don't believe in that. But can I believe that the CEO of Facebook has a political opinion? Can I believe that the CEO of Twitter has a political opinion? Can I believe you all get my drift? Yes, I believe that. But I do not believe that they give a shit about any one of our 5 posts. What happens is Andy sees me post something, and I didn't do it. I post something from Louis Farrakhan that says that we should kill people that don't look like us, and we need to do it today because the reckoning is coming, and God made us the chosen people. And then I post that we will be meeting Tuesday night after the inauguration, and we are going to plummet and we're going to raid white communities. Andy will see that, and he will go and report it. He'll go on his Facebook.
No, I will not.
His Twitter. Okay, somebody will see
Somebody
it,
will,
and they
yeah,
will
somebody
report it. When it gets taken down.
That's the problem. Do we only want speech that nobody will report?
First off, no amendment.
They build systems that cater to the complainers.
I can't say bomb on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say fire in a crowded movie theater. That is from Southfield High School law class, circa 2000.
Right. Even
like, speech isn't absolute. So stop acting like speech is absolute.
Fire in a theater has been legal for 50 years. So you got to go back to your civil teacher.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that I can yell fire in a crowded theater. I can yell, hold on, and what we're spinning back to, I can say words that incite people to respond. You're telling me, because what you're saying is anything to come out of my mouth is okay. That's false. Slander, it is words that come out of my mouth. If they are false, if they are lies, I am liable for
But
it.
the
If
slander,
I write words that are false, that is now libel. So speech is not absolute, but we act like it is.
Hold on.
We have a test, though. It's called the Brandenburg test.
Push back. Go ahead, Dennis. What were you going to say?
oh man, the speech thing fires me up because it hits at the core of who we are as people.
Mhm.
And I'm here. I'm here. We're all here. And when somebody starts quieting my voice, I'm looking out into the world and I'm saying, here's what I see. Here's what I appear to be seeing. Do you see it? That person next to me, one, should have the right to decide that for themselves, but two, I should have the right to say it. And when you start controlling people's voice, you're controlling them as a being. And that is water that we just don't want to go into.
But
You got the
controlling
First Amendment right, but you
voice-
can't engage in hate speech, though. See
I-
that caveat? You got the freedom of speech, but you can't engage in hate speech.
I agree. But if I'm going to stand on a box and say, I hate colored people, I hate Asian people, everybody but white people, I'm going to receive some repercussions for that.
Right.
But that's different.
But if you're an elected official and you say that and it leads
I-
to violence, that's like
It's murky
premeditation.
part when it's the president and all that other stuff. But it's like, man, we're playing with fire, and
Well, here's where I think I agree with you. I agree with you, Dennis, from the level of you should not suppress people's speech. That is what the First Amendment is. I do not look at any form of social media as your speech. I look at it as the microphone. So nobody says which type of microphone you have to use. So if you want to use I'm just making this up, an Apple microphone. If Apple says you cannot use our microphone, that did not limit your microphone. And the only thing that I think is so inconsistent is we act like people don't have the same levels of speech, non-political, taken away from them. So what we're saying is nobody should ever have their...
If Twitter today said that black people can't use Twitter anymore, would you agree with that since it's a private company, that they should be able to do that?
Oh,
No, that's discrimination. It's discriminatory practice. They're saying you can't put up hate stuff and violent content.
Or
That's
things that they
different.
determine is that.
No,
fine.
they're saying you can't have an account here.
Right. But here's what's different. There are laws that stop you from doing that level of discrimination.
Exactly.
What I think
That is
what I hear
specific to
Dennis
discrimination based upon my
The color of your
ethnicity.
skin. Yeah.
what I hear Dennis
That's
saying,
different
if
than
if you think I'm a 2A absolutist, I'm a 1A absolutist even more. I agree very much with what Dennis said. What our Constitution says regarding 1A is that we hold these rights to be inalienable, inherent to our humanity, essentially.
But they're not.
1A is a limitation on Congress. When you limit the speech of another human, you are violating an innate human right of theirs. You
Will
are.
Congress stop Twitter from allowing Donald Trump to have his Twitter?
That would be a 1A
Where in Congress,
violation, but I think it misses the point. We have a
no, it's
human
not.
right.
You're literal. 1A specifically talks about Congress doing that.
Mhm.
Not to say
I
about
said-
I can kick anybody.
I
with all
said
due
that
respect, I
1A
can
is a
kick anybody
limitation
out
on
of my
Congress.
house that says something.
1A is a limitation on Congress, and I think it's the cheapest way for people with your viewpoint to defend their position.
What?
yeah, what do you mean by
I think it's the easiest, cheapest way
what
for
part
you
of
to defend your
Congress
position.
is limiting it?
I've never said Congress has limited it. I said that
So you're not talking about 1A anymore.
I never was.
You just said you are a 1A enthusiast. Literally 2 minutes
A
ago. you
1A
said you are.
absolutist. Absolutist.
It specifically talks about Congress, right?
What does it say before that? What does it say what does it say the nature of our rights are? The source of our rights.
God.
They're innate to our humanity. We hold these rights to be inalienable. Then it says Congress can't limit them. But you have a human right. What Dennis just said, you have a human right to free speech. And
Where is it violated?
anyone who restricts that is violating your human rights.
No. But that's where we are having a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what you are talking about. If you're saying that Donald Trump is not allowed to project his message in 100% capacities, I agree with you. If Donald Trump isn't allowed to project his message using certain capacities, that's on him.
This is modern day book burning, and should be opposed by every person who respects civil liberties. And that is the stance of Angela Merkel of Germany. That is the stance of Macron of France. That is the stance of the ACLU.
I got a book about
you are in opposition to the ACLU. You're in opposition to Angela Merkel, Germany. You're in opposition to Macron, France, who have all roundly and clearly criticized what these companies are doing. Jack for Twitter came out today. I don't know if you guys saw this, and said, "I fear that we set a dangerous precedent." He's already second guessing what he's done. I think a lot of decisions are made on emotion where our team wins a small point for the day and we lock in and defend that point. What is your principles? My principle, and what Dennis gave voice to, is that speech is very close to your humanity. And when you muzzle someone, when you burn books, when you ban ideas, when you shut down Twitter accounts, when you cancel Parler, these kind of things are the opposite of a society which values things like free speech.
No. What you're saying right now is that it is a violation of human rights that McDonald's does not sell crab.
I wish you'd
stick
to things I actually said. I wish you'd stick to things I actually said.
No, like the argument is private versus public. The First Amendment says nothing about private. It says Congress, which is public. So that was the loophole for Twitter, Facebook, all the social media outlets that are privately owned companies to be able to suspend an account. Donald Trump is not the first nor last person to have their account suspended for engaging
There's
in
a porn star in LA that's
violating
mad
terms
at
and
Twitter.
conditions.
It
Here's
goes.
the question.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Has social media turned into something that's more than just a private company? Has it become so in our lives that it's become actual parts of our own voice?
No, it's become a resource. No, it's become a free, honestly, Dennis, it's become a free resource. So this is what I'm saying. Dennis, you own a CrossFit gym. It is so easy and cheap for you to advertise your gym via social media, to get the message out about your gym, for people to leave reviews about your gym. That does not limit you getting out your message. You can still buy ads. You can still find airtime on local news. You can still do all of these things.
What you're saying,
nobody is saying if you can't post on social media, you can't advertise.
Talking about like 2 minutes ago, like when I brought up the dichotomy between your discussion, Andrew, and Vernon's, this is literally the mirror image of that, because now Vernon is advocating the literal legal standing, how the First Amendment works in relation to what's happened to Trump, and Andrew's position is the social impact of what's happening not in terms of what we've written is allowed and what's not allowed and how we navigate around those rules to get what we want. He's stating that what's happening is objectively wrong in relation to what's happening, regardless of what is written and what's allowed to happen to people and what you're allowed to do as a business owner. He's literally stating the fact that the suppression is still there, regardless of the government involvement. It's still suppression. So I understand where he's coming from in that regard. Now, where I would interject in that argument, now that I'm trying to put them on the same plane, where do we hold the responsibility of the microphone if we find that the voice that is being utilized is routinely being utilized to cause violence, which would be a violation of rights to who's being harmed? So in terms of like Parler being silenced, Parler was a hotbed where people utilized that platform to plan situations. And we're not blaming Trump. We're just saying these are individuals on their own accord.
So
that
is
utilize
Twitter.
Platform
So is
to,
Twitter.
and I'm not arguing that, you know, but what I'm saying is,
But Twitter takes a stand against it.
Parler-
So, you know, when you take that,
Parler is a brand new company. It took Twitter a minute to get their moderation together.
Mhm.
They didn't get it overnight.
Right.
And Twitter happens to have their content served on Amazon Web Services servers, just like Parler did. And I'll circle back to what I said earlier. Twitter is doing their best to get rid of depictions of extreme violence. They still have photos of Kathy Lee Gifford holding the severed head of the president. And that sits on an Amazon server tonight. That sits on an AWS server right now.
But
There are
okay,
still tweets out there calling
you're
for the
saying
death
there's
of Aaron Trump,
disproportionality.
the minor child of Donald Trump. And those sit right now on the servers of Amazon. And that's allowed to exist. Yet a brand new company that sprung up out of nothing in response to big tech censorship gets
I
shut
got
down
a
in
question when
24
you
hours by
mentioned-
Apple, Google, and Amazon. Within 24 hours, those three companies all said sayonara. They also had all their other vendors, including their lawyers, bail on them. A startup tech company that gives a voice to conservatives.
would you agree?
And you wonder why we're pissed.
Would you agree
Well,
that
so
the
I got two
individual
questions though
severed
for
head of
that.
Trump incited people who perceived it to attempt to harm Donald Trump?
Incitement has a
Would you feel
specific legal
Okay.
definition. I object to that.
No, you can't use legal jargon for that and not for
would have led to
terms of service.
You use a different word and I'll agree to it. I said that what he's done the last 2 months was not presidential.
So if Hitler had a Twitter account or
That'd be different.
Facebook or any of those, and Hitler was saying we're going to destroy the Jews, and they said we're suspending your account, what would y'all say?
I
to
think
that?
the Jews might have been the ones more likely to get their Twitter account suspended.
But still, if Hitler was putting out racist,
Dennis' face.
inflammatory, violent content on these social media outlets, inciting violence, what do you think would happen?
Inciting has a very specific definition.
well,
If Hitler, listen to what I'm saying, because we all know how Hitler was.
Well,
If Hitler
let
was
me-
saying what he
Let's
planned to
say,
do-
tell you what, let's seek some agreement. Let's say that Trump deserves to be deplatformed from these social media giants. Let's say he deserves that.
No, I'm not saying he deserves it.
No, I'm
just
saying
that
I'm
it's
saying let's
okay.
let's agree for a moment that it's not a problem. Let's agree for a moment it's not a problem. What next? I have clients. One of my top businesses is we fill orders for websites that are owned by people all over the world. We have a lot of clients that sell Trump material. The majority of those clients are liberals, and they're just taking advantage of how popular Trump material is, and they're just capitalists making money on it. Shopify took down all stores selling Trump-related material. So if we can expand this a little bit, if you just give me the
Didn't, though.
I'll tell them all to go to Etsy. Shopify,
no,
the
no.
largest e-commerce.
Limiting would be you are not allowed to do this. What you're saying is you don't like that I can't
Good
have an
God.
infinite number of platforms.
You didn't make Andy call on
he's
God.
advocating for suppression. That would be suppression.
Is absolutely tyrannical, and you would be front of the line burning books, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Would you?
But we'll move past that.
It sounds like you're okay
Burn-
with suppression of
burning
speech,
books, hold on,
as long
hold
as
on,
you can
hold on.
speak anywhere else.
Hold on,
No,
I'm gonna
it's
help you.
it's
I'm gonna
more
help
so
you.
the contracts, the terms and
I'm
conditions.
going to help you.
And
I'm gonna
Okay,
help you.
can someone
I
sell
do.
memorabilia that has
You-
Trump's name on it?
When your kids get to Lake Orion High School, hopefully I'm still an administrator there, you're going to receive communications from me. So I'm going to go through a couple of things. So I can send out a tweet from @Mr. Burden LO. And usually my tweet is something that I've already mailed. And then I can also call people on the phone. I can leave voicemail. I can also speak in the auditorium. If I don't have my Twitter, that did not limit my voice. So if you're talking about burning books, I got you. I'm with you. I'm going to go with the extreme. Burning books, burning my book did not take away my voice. Burning
Nailed it.
books did
Called-
not take away my voice, unless
But-
you're saying the government
No,
did.
I called it. I said you would be okay with burning books, and you are.
Yeah, sure. What
Vernon,
I think that
Vernon, you are okay with limiting speech, and when speech is limited, you will still sit there with a straight face and say that speech
I
was
called
not
you out
limited.
yesterday. Yes,
You
I
say
limit speech.
speech is not.
I tell
Speech is
people
not
that
limited.
they shouldn't say things.
When
Absolutely.
speech is
I
limited,
tell kids
speech
that
is
they
not
can't
yet
use
limited.
profanity in school.
Mhm.
Hold on, I'm gonna tell you. I tell kids every day they can't use profanity in school
Mhm.
because it is a school rule. I limit that speech. I tell
Mhm.
kids that they
Mhm.
can't use any type of rhetoric towards
Mhm.
weapons or bombs in school because it is a school rule. It is
Mhm.
not a constitutional rule.
Mhm.
I
But
made
it's
a school rule that said it. So yes, I am in violation of the First Amendment because even board policy says that they can't say certain things
Mhm.
because speech is not absolute because of the Constitution. So absolutely, I live it. So you can try and create this cute little, I would burn books. No, I'm telling you, I do this shit.
No, you'd be okay with burning
Absolutely.
books.
Absolutely.
But private
I
companies
limit
have
speech
contracts
every
and
day,
agreements with
buddy,
terms.
Yeah.
because First Amendment isn't absolute.
And that's why
You're
I'm
okay
trying
with
to
limiting
like bring it.
speech? I don't know.
Absolutely.
I have a
Your
big
kid
problem
comes
with
to school, I'm going to take away their educational rights for a day if they
And-
call a teacher a bitch. If a kid calls your wife a bitch, I'm
Responsibility
going to suspend
for
them from
social
school.
media.
But they agreed to that by coming to that school.
Hey,
That's
any
a
type
part
of
of the
reaction
agreement. Like
when-
you use that outlet, you
when
agree
those
to the
actions
terms and
are
Yup.
agreement.
Yep,
That's
somebody's going to walk into your
Hey.
wife's class and call her the C word,
Taking
and you're going to say, hey,
taking
no,
society
we don't
taking
burn
societal
books.
taking examples from society where we have grown adults and using
No. People,
in drawing hold on
where's adult
in
outlined
drawing
in the
parallels. This is
Constitution?
something you
Adult-
do a lot and it bothers me. This is something you do a lot and it bothers me.
Dr. Stacy,
Let me tell you.
adult outlined in the Constitution. Is there an age limit on rights?
No.
Is there an age limit on?
Does a school have a special right to limit the behavior of the students in their care? Yes, they do.
Know. I will go with.
Yes, they do. You take these societal examples and you take them to minors over and over. They're not applicable. They're not applicable. We're talking about adults in society.
The private
What about
companies have a
TLO
vested
versus
interest
Des
in
Moines?
protecting their company.
You want to Google TLO versus Des Moines?
What's the case?
Oh, no. You're speaking of these things. We will go through certain.
I just didn't hear you. What case?
Okay. So I'm saying there have been plenty of educational elements of free speech, whether it's protesting the war in Vietnam. There are plenty of educational Supreme Court decisions based upon free speech.
Mm-hmm.
So my
I'm pressing you how far.
Stacy hit on the.
How far you'll take that? You're okay with Trump being taken down? I get it. You're okay with people selling Trump-related material taken down? I get it.
I'm okay with a neo-Nazi group not having a fucking Twitter. Are you fucking serious? Yeah,
I'm serious. I want to see.
Take education out of it and look at the private company. Every private company has a duty and an obligation to protect their brand. They have contracts and agreements because they're like, this is how I want my brand represented. This is how I want my platform to be utilized. If you violate that, then we're going to hold you accountable. So when you sign those terms and agreements to that contract, like I agree not to engage in hate speech, not to put up violent content, not to do X, Y, and Z, and then you violate it, then there's consequences. And like we said, sometimes they don't catch all of them, right? Just like criminals slip through the cracks. People who commit those offenses, violating those terms and agreements, may slip through the cracks. But when you're an elected official, and this is what Trump has done, he's changed the trajectory of how elected officials use social media in a way because he uses it so much. I've never seen a president tweet like this. It's crazy. But because he's chosen to do that, he put himself in that position. Like, you want to choose to use Twitter as your diary. You want to choose to use Twitter to relate to your followers and have them encourage them to do whatever. Then you got the consequences that come behind it. You violated Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, whatever their terms and agreements are. You violated it, so that's what happened.
I agree. I'm not in disagreement. What I'm saying is, how far does that authoritarian streak run?
That's private company, though. That's a part of their right as a private company.
Does it run the Walkaway Facebook page shares testimonials of former Democrats who left the party. That's what they do. The page was taken down. Okay, I disagree with that. You know who else was banned that day from Facebook? Every employee and every volunteer. So I'm going to continue going down the line. We're okay with Trump. We're okay with Trump-related materials.
Were you banned?
Let's answer the question that I actually asked. is it reasonable to go wipe out the Facebook accounts of all employees and volunteers of a testimonial group?
I see bullshit on Facebook
Oh.
every day, B.
Oh.
You're still good with that?
Oh,
I think you're going to be good with like
No,
everything, Vernon.
So what I would say is when they do that and they send you the alerts,
Mhm.
they have to tell you, like, we've suspended your account because you violated clause 1B out of our terms and agreement. And if
They're
you
not very
violated that, well,
They
they're
just
supposed to.
been suspended.
But
and
But
you're
if
like,
they
what do I
send
do?
it
Mhm.
and you see it as, okay, this is unethical or this is infringing my rights, you have a right to challenge that and file a lawsuit. Now, I don't know how your outcome gonna be, because like we always say, anybody can sue, but can you win? Because
Mhm.
private institutions have the
Yeah, I'm
right
just
to
seeing.
sue.
I'm just like I said. I'm just seeing how far the authoritarian streak runs. AOC came out
I'm
today.
following the fuck Obama hashtag.
AOC came out today. Oh, they still allow that one?
All type of fuck
Do they still
Obama.
allow that one?
nothing discredit.
Still up.
Report it. Report it.
I'm
The
gonna go with kill Obama.
oh, report
Let me ask
it.
Andrew a question. Let me ask you a
AOC
quick
came out
question.
today and
What do you,
Hashtag kill Obama.
asked for a truth commission,
Kill
truth
Obama
commission
still
to
exists.
quote unquote rein in the media.
But
So let's
does it
keep going.
what do you
AOC
Kill
came out
Obama.
today and said, let's
Hashtag.
do.
level
Yeah,
of
I understand. I understand. Search
What-
if you want to get really offended, search Obama khaki suit. It's still up.
You
I love
I'm with you.
that.
Kill Obama still is on Twitter.
I love that
Kill
example.
Obama is on
I
Twitter. But
I
you
just
were
love it.
saying
I
that
love the khaki suit.
conservative
I love the
speech is
khaki
limited.
suit complaint.
You are passionate.
Kill
AOC
Obama's on Twitter.
AOC called for a government commission today. She said that the deplatforming does not go far enough, and called today for a truth commission to quote unquote rein in untruths on the media.
right? Who's that?
How do we
with live fact checking?
feel about that?
Then they started that with live fact checking. We now see live fact checking on things you post where they'll put a little disclaimer like this is 50% inaccurate or here's why.
Are we all
Or it's
clear on who
accurate and here's
fact
why.
checkers are? Fact checkers are the
No.
editorial boards of liberal newspapers. When newspapers were dying, their editorial boards rebranded as fact checkers. Look into who fact checkers are. You should
Well,
not
tell
believe
somebody
them.
from the Epoch
You should
Times
not trust
to
them
do a
any more
better
than you
job
trust the
getting the
liberal
interview.
editorial boards of failing newspapers because they're the same humans.
What's the
Understood, but these
solution?
private
here?
companies
What
chose to
level
use
of
them to fact check.
responsibility do you feel that these social media platforms should have, and what do you feel should be the limits on that responsibility? I'm curious, Andrew, because you are passionate and
Me
you
too,
do
I'm
feel that
curious.
overreach is occurring here. What do you feel would be an appropriate measure that would
I believe the most appropriate punishments and consequences are in the free market, and that's what offends me so much about Parler being deplatformed from Apple, Google, and Amazon.
Then stop using Apple.
Oh, well,
Protest Apple.
long ago, bud.
Fuck iPhones.
Agreed.
That is your First Amendment right, is to protest these companies. And I'm not talking about you, Andy. I think it is asinine.
But when you're taking off the Apple App Store and the Google App Store, then you need to have your own App Store, which means you need your own devices. And if you're taking off of Amazon's web servers, then you need your own server farm to scale. Figure it out. Stripe stopped processing. Stripe and Deutsche Bank stopped processing payments for these companies. These merchant processors are shutting everybody down. Email servers, text servers, lawyers. You need a whole damn world.
She sat her ass down. So if you're upset about utilizing those platforms, the government isn't limiting you from creating your own server.
Okay.
The government's not limiting you from creating your own server.
So to have a place where our speech is protected and can stay up and not be taken down by liberal tech companies, we need our own devices, we need our own app store, we need our own servers, we need our own lawyers, we need our own merchant processing, and our own banks. I've got a different idea. How about we just have a free society?
Whoa, that sounds like
That sounds like being black in America, Andy. I'm sorry. That's
oh shit. That
What's
sounds
from?
like a Black Lives Matter protest.
right there. That's being black.
That
I think it's called a social justice protest.
in society.
I think that's a social justice
need to
protest.
have your own farms, have your own grocery stores, have your own
That's
bank.
being black in
Have your-
America.
Man, that
Black
is
Wall
that is
Street.
so
saying, though, is
profound.
that-
I absolutely agree with you,
Bernie,
Andy.
but what
I
Andrew's saying
I've been
is that
I've been
agree with you.
they have
pretty
to walk
I've been
back
pretty busy today.
for it.
I've been pretty busy today. Are blacks excluded from all those
Hold on.
services?
No, that's the thing.
Oh.
If you wanted it,
Okay, so, but here's the thing, Vernon.
No, news moves
Like you
fast.
said,
I thought I missed something.
No. We're telling you that's what blacks had to go through. We couldn't
Oh.
go. We couldn't sit in a restaurant. We couldn't.
Oh,
go to
so
we couldn't be a doctor,
maybe-
lawyer, teacher.
So
all that.
maybe you'll understand this. Maybe you'll understand this better than most then.
Right. So maybe it's hard for Vernon and I to sympathize because we're like, oh, you trying to talk.
Oh,
I'm not
no,
asking you to
no, no,
sympathize.
no,
I'm
no.
asking you to understand.
I'm sorry. How do I'm being honest, Andy.
Mhm.
Here's the difference. When blacks couldn't eat a slice of pie at a
Mhm.
restaurant because they were black,
Mhm.
it was easy as shit to see black, no pie.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry, with all due respect, I don't know, other than when you open your mouth, who you voted for. I don't know your political standing from looking at you, Dennis. Hell, Johnny voted for Donald Trump. You didn't know that probably before tonight. So you have no idea where someone's political standing is. That makes it completely opposite of discrimination based on ethnicity. Nobody knows how I vote. Nobody knows, because I sit inside of a booth on election day by myself to vote. Nobody knows if I voted for John James or Gary Peters. Nobody knows if I voted for the school millage to pass or if I voted it down. No one knows.
With all due
Here's the thing.
respect, that feels like a massive deflection from the point of how free speech affects the public discourse.
And hold on, Vernon, before you reply to that, let me just say this. Now, what he's saying, what you agreed to, is that they would have to have their own servers, phones, and all those things for Parler to be a thing and for them to have a voice in that perspective. You're saying they have a way to have that message, but if they were to do those things, doesn't that become an echo chamber? The one thing that we say we don't want them to have is an echo chamber where they're just reverberating off of each other. So
Yeah,
now they have to
right,
do that.
but
For free speech.
You know?
Honestly, not to say it like this, Johnny, I know plenty of people that live in an echo chamber. Social media doesn't create the echo chamber. People's intentions create the echo chamber. Those are two totally different things. So if I only want to deal with Michigan football fans, I will go to a Michigan football Facebook group. Hell, that is not saying that Michigan State groups can't exist. That's not saying that if I wanted to, I couldn't go in there. So I agree. I understand what you're saying of echo chamber. That's for civil discourse. Those are two totally different arguments. What I am saying is, if you do not agree with the terms and practices and policies of a entity, then create your own or find your own, which has been a practice for centuries for African
For black
Americans.
people, we've had to create our own.
Like I don't understand. I'm not.
Want everybody to start segregating again? No.
No.
We're already divided.
No.
You see that?
Hold on.
Well,
Let me
we
say
gotta
this.
Other.
I understand. I understand you, Dennis, but I'm going to give the best example. To be honest, African Americans in the South were not allowed to go to state universities,
Right.
public universities.
Exactly. So they had to create black.
The
colleges.
creation of historically black colleges and universities did not limit any one of us five from going to them,
Right.
but it created a place for us to receive the same education.
Right.
Who
That's all I'm saying.
who made
If
the
you
funding of
don't
those
like what's
HBCUs
happening,
permanent?
create your HBCU.
Oh,
What?
no! Shout out to Trump for doing that. But again, his negativity overshadows the positive.
So
things he's done,
is
and that's
Trump the
his
first
fault.
president to have
Yes, actually,
No.
he is. He's the
What?
first.
What?
No.
Trump
he
is the
renewed
first
it for
president
10
to
years.
give
Other
any federal
presidents
Is
funds
that what
to HBCU?
I said.
What did you say? He gave the most?
No, he made it.
Nope.
What did you
Made
say?
it permanent.
He said made it.
made it permanent.
So they didn't have to come begging for it every year. They came the first year and asked him for it, and he said, "Of course, we'll give it to you." They came the second year, asked for it, and he said, "You have to do this every year." And they said, "Yes, sir. We have to come every year." And he said, "That's a travesty. We're making it permanent," and he did.
Absolutely. No question about that. Again, I'm going to go back to this. Did I question policy? but now we've switched topics to platforms. So if the governor of Alabama stands on the steps of the University of Alabama, who I just watched have a Heisman Trophy winner, look like me, who I just watched have a running back, look like me. 55 years ago, the governor of Alabama stood on the steps of the University of Alabama and said, people that look like you will not go to the University of Alabama. Now, if you take that to 100 years previously to that, when blacks were freed from slavery, Alabama would not let blacks in. University of South Alabama, Mississippi State, all of these universities. So what was created? Alcorn State. What was created? Alabama A&M. What was created? Alabama State. So I am saying same thing Stacey's saying. I'm sorry that Parler isn't allowed on Apple servers. So find conservatives that want to develop a server. Like
My question for you is, when the governor of Alabama stood on those steps and said that people like you will never attend that university, was that good policy or bad policy?
It was discrimination.
It was bad policy. And
It was bad
agreed.
policy. But
Agreed.
I got a question. Again, that still goes back to how does it, like I'm missing it.
So
Are 100%
you are missing it, Vernon. So I'm going to say something
No,
intentionally
are 100%
offensive.
of conservatives
Intentionally offensive.
eliminated from Twitter?
I'm going to say something
100% of
intentionally
conservatives eliminated
offensive.
from Twitter?
I'm going to say something intentionally
then it started the
offensive,
camera off to laugh.
so you can
Are
feel.
100%
so you can hear it,
of
okay?
conservatives eliminated?
In the face of that bad policy from the governor of Alabama,
No. 100%
How would you
of
feel?
blacks weren't allowed to go.
how would you feel?
100%.
How would you feel in the face of that if anyone said, "There's another college you can go to"?
No.
It's
There's a
dismissive.
difference. Hold
It's
on.
dismissive.
It's not the same.
Are we
thing.
trying to come together
100% of
or
blacks
not?
weren't allowed to
I
go
told
to
you
Alabama.
in the group this week that I am more sympathetic to the Black Lives Matter social justice movement right now than I was prior to this election.
I
I
understand.
can relate, I can understand and feel your complaints more now than I could prior.
Because you're a
And I'm
conservative?
asking you
Are you
I'm
saying that
asking
because
you
you're a conservative?
to,
He's saying it because he's a human.
because
Are you saying you feel that because you're a
I'm-
conservative?
don't call myself a conservative. I'm a libertarian. I'm saying
Okay,
that
no,
I
no.
understand your
You just
arguments.
said conservatives are being blocked from Twitter and all of these other things.
Yeah.
Libertarians, Joe Jorgensen doesn't give a fuck about Twitter
Ron Paul-
right now. You are saying
Well,
conservatives.
Ron Paul was locked out of his Facebook account this week.
Rand Paul is a liberal?
Ron
I'm sorry.
Paul, his father.
Okay, so I'm you're not comparing the same thing. What I'm saying is George Wallace said that 100% of people that are African Americans cannot go to the University of Alabama unless you are bringing an example where 100% of people aren't allowed to do something. We are not talking about the same thing.
I am making a civil argument to you that you are missing an opportunity to come together.
Well, all right.
Are you
I
saying
talk to
come together
conservatives
for the
every
right
day.
and freedom of speech?
Platform
Is that
We
what-
can,
I'm talking to 3 Trump
Can I
voters.
create a Parler account and post the same things that I post on Facebook all the time on Parler? Would they embrace me to come together? Because I am Second Amendment, yes, but I also post things that are pro Black Lives Matter. I post things that are pro this or that because I try to be more so objective in the things I do. But Parler is known to be a conservative social media platform. So if I was to go there, and I don't classify myself as a liberal or a conservative really, but I'm going to post things that are sometimes not aligned with their view, I don't know that I would be embraced to come together, so to speak. But and I agree with you where you're saying, having us to make this centralized, platform ourselves to have it, I think sucks, because I agree from a Black person's perspective that it sucked having to do that ourselves in history. So I agree with you there. But at the same time, I don't agree that Parler was baseline here. I feel like Parler had their platform. They had what they wanted. It wasn't necessarily about unity, though, So again, that's why I was asking you, what do you feel would be the appropriate responsibility for these microphones, for the social media base, when it comes to the people that use it? Because if I go on Twitter right now and post inflammatory things, it may not be seen because I only have like 100 followers on Twitter. I don't really use it, you know. But then again, if I do that and someone takes issue with it, they will then have to respond. So you had a situation, you know, a week ago where a large portion of America responded to what they saw, which kind of forced a reaction from the platforms. Did they overreach? I would say probably so, because if they're, you know, canceling out people that are just because they're associated and they haven't actually done something wrong, I agree that that's wrong. But again, that's where I ask you, what would be the reasonable amount of responsibility to act when you have a reaction from your base, your customers? They're saying, "Hey, we don't like this." What is the reasonable response? That's what I'm asking. Like, what would be reasonable here, where we could unify on what's happening?
We have Section 230 in this country, which gives liability immunity from lawsuits to these platforms, and allows them. So you end up in a situation where, say you're the New York Times. The New York Times gets to proactively choose what they publish in their paper and what they don't. They are a publisher. Platforms opened up, and you had AOL, and could AOL be responsible for what some jerk says in a thread somewhere? They said, we can't possibly moderate all these things. It's the Wild West. And Congress responded and said, you're exactly right. We will allow you to remove extreme violence, pedophilia. They gave a list of things that you're allowed to remove, and still remain a platform, not a publisher, to keep your immunity from lawsuits. When we talk about these platforms being private, we have to recognize that they also enjoy liability, immunity from liability from the government, which allows them to exist in the first place. So when these platforms begin removing content that goes outside of the allowable areas that Section 230 gives them, that's where conservatives, I believe, have a legitimate complaint to say, you're abusing the immunity that is granted to you by the federal government. That same immunity allows you to exist. When you remove content that is not per Section 230, you're a publisher. And the market response, when you say, what should the response be? I said my first preference would be for the free market to spawn up a company that could compete with them. Parler did that, got shut down. My second response would be, go to the courts. However, these companies enjoy immunities per Section 230 that allow them to kind of publish, kind of moderate their content, but still act like they don't moderate their content. And I think that's a logical loophole that's being exploited by companies that are largely based on the West Coast, that give donations at an 80-20 pace to Democrats, that are largely staffed with young, idealistic Democrats. And the outcome of that, like Dennis asked, do you think that these rules in terms of service are being applied equally? Hell no, they're not. Hell no, they're not. And it's obvious on its face.
That's a perspective, but I have a question. I'm glad you brought that up because of the difference between a publisher and a platform. So I have a question about, like, is there a difference between a free platform and because what you're talking about,
difference.
I understand. So what you're talking about is Facebook, Twitter, social media platforms are exactly the same as Verizon,
Cell phone company.
Sprint, T-Mobile,
AT&T.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So they're
Yep.
all under the same umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I should have the right to use Verizon, AT&T, whatever form of telecommunication platform I want at any time. So I should be able to use Verizon on this phone
Mhm.
right now. All right, why can't I use Verizon on this phone right now?
Because you're not a Verizon customer.
I'm sorry?
Because you're not a Verizon customer?
So I have to pay in order to utilize.
I
this
had already
Verizon?
answered that question. Section 230 does not speak to whether the service is paid for or free.
Okay, so Verizon can limit me. I can't speak on Verizon service because I don't pay for it because they require me to pay to use their service.
One more time.
But Twitter can't limit.
One more time, these rules do not speak to whether the service is paid or free. That's not a fact. That's not a factor in the law.
Okay, so it just depends on what their terms of service.
No.
I'm sorry?
No. The immunity given for platforms to be allowed to block speech without being sued is listed and very clear in Section 230. It includes things like pedophilia, terrorism, extreme violence,
So
etc.
I'm not doing
Harassment.
anything. Why is Verizon blocking me from using them?
You're not a customer.
Why are they allowed to make me have to be a
I'm going to
customer?
say this respectfully. Your point has nothing to do with Section 230.
I asked the question. I'm uneducated. You're educated on it.
Section 230. Section 230 says that. Let's say
No.
Verizon.
I'm asking a very specific question. I'm serious. Section 230 says that unless I'm doing one of those outline things that you've said, that they cannot limit me from utilizing their platform.
Correct.
Okay. And nothing in there mentioned finances. You completely said that there is nothing mentioned of financial agreement.
Let me tweak what you said a little bit. They cannot limit your
No,
use.
I'm
of
asking a serious question.
I am.
If I have not violated,
I want to answer it specifically. They cannot limit
violence, whatever. If I'm not violating that, why can't I, any individual day, use Verizon one day, AT&T the next day? Why can't I do that?
What
if they're all the same?
What Section 230 speaks to is whether or not these platforms can limit your speech on there. So let's say that Verizon says that you're no longer allowed to talk about Michigan football.
Right.
That would not be a protected reason for Verizon Wireless to block your communications. It does not mean that they can't deny your service because you don't pay for their paid service.
Okay.
It means these are the things that these are the ways these platforms can violate your free speech without you suing them.
Right.
Gotcha.
And it is the conservative stance, and I think it's legitimate, that these companies are abusing Section 230. And here's the caveat. Here's the caveat.
Okay, so real quick, with what you just said, so you are saying that Twitter is utilizing a loophole in 230 that you don't like because it impacts you, but it's not saying that Twitter is wrong. You're saying it's a slippery slope, but you're not saying they are doing something wrong.
I believe they're abusing. I believe that when you say they're a private company can do whatever you want, that there's a big asterisk on that, and that big asterisk is Section 230, where the U.S. government, in our name, has given them liability protection from conservatives who have their businesses destroyed by the biased application of censorship on these platforms. They're shielded from those lawsuits. As Johnny asked me, what should be the consequences? What should happen next? How should these platforms, what should the response be? My second response should be lawsuits. But these companies are shielded. These companies are shielded from these lawsuits. And I don't think they should be. I don't think they should be.
It's discretion inherent in that in Section 230. Each company has a discretion to determine what is considered violent, hate speech, or things like that. There's an inherent discretion in there, just like officers have an inherent discretion to determine how severe they're going to apply the law when you are come in counsel with them. And it's been justified across the board. That's what we've been seeing. So there's a discretion for private companies to say, hey, we flag this because it comes across as violent, it comes across as violating our terms and conditions, and we're investigating it, and it's been flagged. He is not the only. I know people that's had their account been in Facebook jail forever, or back to back, or been suspended, or ousted and had to go to other platforms to express themselves. A lot of people have left social media and go to YouTube to do that. What you say, Johnny?
Facebook jail. Kids just got
out of Facebook jail.
We see you out there, kid.
Yeah.
Revolution for Ken. It must have been because you were conservative.
Right.
You know,
And so that's what I'm saying. It
Careful,
happens across
careful with
the
that raised
board.
fist, Vernon. Careful with
Hey.
that raised fist. That was
Hey.
cited. That was cited
Right.
as an act of violence by Senator Josh Hawley this week. This week, raised fist, act of violence.
Oh my God. See, that
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Just
We
be
have
careful,
Over it.
Vernon. I don't want you in
how
Facebook
far
jail.
oh, I mean, how far
That-
do you take it? I mean, they can just
That's what I was trying to get at earlier. It goes as far as they want.
exactly.
It goes as far as they want.
No. I'm going to make it real clear. I see educators, especially administrators, all the time have Twitter accounts,
Mm-hmm.
like all the time.
But they have responsibilities. They can't do
But-
certain things. So I can't
But
do
I'm
certain
going to tell you the loophole that administrators use. In their profile, in their bio, they always put that things that are posted on this account are from the mental capacity and from the mental ownership of their name. That takes away from them acting as an agent of whatever school they work in.
Mm-hmm.
So that limits. It's just like, and I know we've gone down this about the real Donald Trump compared to at POTUS. If Donald Trump, over the last however many 4 years, wanted to use at POTUS and put the same things, he would be stopped in so many capacities from posting the things that he posts on his personal page. What I am saying,
Please,
trying to say I burned.
Can you please expound on that?
I'm still speaking. What I'm trying to say
please
is,
expound on that. I didn't get it.
I know.
He's
What I'm
encouraged.
trying to say is, I understand that if I violate the terms of agreement, that there was an outline consequence. And I have now put into somebody else's decision making whether I utilize that platform. When we're saying, where does it stop? And I know I did it kind of comically. The fact that hashtag kill Obama is still a hashtag utilized on Twitter. We could all agree that kill the president or the 44th president of the United States is not protected under 230.
Correct.
We should all agree with that.
Correct.
But it still exists. These accounts still exist, all of those things. So I'm lost at this big tech attack, and where does it stop on conservative voice when I just went on Mitch McConnell's Twitter? I just went on it. I just went on Hawley's Twitter. They still have it. So the inconsistencies of saying that conservative voices are being muted, I don't have a point where that makes sense. Donald Trump has been put into Twitter jail. He's been put in Pinterest jail. He's been put in whatever jail you want via social media. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that as poignantly as possible, they have flagged his post for months.
They have.
After his post last week, they flagged him and put him on punishment for 12 hours. He did something after being put on punishment, and now he's crying that shit's not fair. Are
That's
you
3
serious?
strikes.
Are
3
we
strikes.
parents? Are we educators? If I do, listen, stop doing that. Stop. If you do it again, this is going to happen.
Right.
If he does it again. Hey, you do it again, this is going to happen.
This is going to happen.
What fucking world do we not understand that?
What
world do we not understand? He was put on punishment for 12 hours.
because
Kid Brands, kid,
because
I
what?
know you out there. Kid, don't do shit on
For
your
a tweet he
Facebook.
put out.
What did
You just got out of Facebook jail, kid. Don't do anything that violates what they just put you on Facebook punishment for. Like what kind of childish mentality is this? Like Bessie Burton told me, don't do that. You came home late from curfew. Don't do it again.
We don't have numbers, so we can't definitively say whether, yes, it's being applied evenly or not, right? Until we pull some numbers, it's he says, she says. The one thing I kind of got out of this whole
I love it.
thing
We do
was,
have-
I think we all have to,
Numbers.
we need numbers, yeah.
We have them.
No. All right, well, I don't know. I'm running out of steam here. My battery's dying.
He just
It's biased.
wrapped it up.
Come on,
He is-
Dennis. Come on through. Tell us.
Like,
Let's
Mitch
do
McConnell's Twitter still up. Conservative
Can the last
leader of
can the last conservative on Twitter turn out the
He
lights?
tweeted yesterday. He tweeted
Oh.
yesterday. I'll read it to you. He
There's
tweeted
still
yesterday,
one. No problem then, Vernon.
yeah.
My full statement on the next 7 days and the Senate schedule.
Oh my God.
Conservative leader. Let me check Mike Pence. Let me see if his.
Yeah,
is still
check him, check Lindsey Graham, go ahead. But go ahead, Dennis. Because
Mike Pence.
Dennis been sitting here
Come
like
on.
laughing and taking it all in.
Dennis, what's your
I'll take
closing
it.
argument? Because I know you want to wrap it up. What do you got, sir?
I
He
think
tweeted 3 hours ago.
the big thing that I got out of this that I I feel like I got some awareness around was that I feel like we as a generation, or hopefully within the next 5 years, can answer the question is controlling the means of communication controlling speech? I think it's a big question you got to ask, because as these platforms grow and evolve and become they're who we are, we're outsourcing these things for our voices. Are controlling those platforms ultimately controlling speech? I think we're gonna have to answer that question here.
I like that. I like that point of view.
Okay.
Oh,
I
we'll talk
agree
about
with
that
that.
next week. Shoot, that can be
Hey, no. And this be my line. I agree with that point of view. I think the perspective of how do we look at things moving forward always changes.
Yeah.
And I take that from education, where I look at what we traditionally thought was education before March 13th, 2020, and the way that education looks now.
Right.
I think that things are always adaptable. Things are constantly moving. Johnny spoke to it a while back. That's what amendments were in the United States Constitution. Amendment means to change things. And if social media is changing how we look at things and changing how things are impacted, I'm not one that says that our legislators and our politicians are all crooks and all these other things. I think that's my job to contact them. I'm going to contact, whether it is Gary Peters, I'm going to contact my senators, I'm going to contact my representatives from the House, like I'll contact Brenda Lawrence if I have an issue with something. But if I have an issue with it, I also think that my energy level needs to be focused right there. So if I feel that conservative voices are not being heard or are being muted, then I want to take the proper steps to make sure that those injustices don't happen. On the other end, I think there is a huge difference between ethnicity, religious freedoms, and other things outlined in the First Amendment compared to political affiliation. I think those are two completely separate things. If we are in the point of 2021 where we are honestly taking political affiliation the same as your right to religion, if we are taking it at the same as your ethnicity, I think that is irresponsible of us, because it's completely different, because nobody knows those things. And we have moved past certain things from happening with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and so on. But honestly, I know Johnny's going to close out. I loved it. Dennis, thank you for coming on. Andy, thank you for coming on. Hey, it's great, because I love having 5 people where 40% voted for Joe Biden, 60% voted for Donald Trump. And at no point do we have more than a 60-40 split on different issues. And I think that's great. Whether we're talking, I think it's 20/80 when it comes to 2A now, which Which but hey, thank you all, and hopefully we can keep this same energy 2021.
Thank you. Stacy, I'd like to get your closing arguments. Or just your closing piece. Let's not call it arguments.
Oh yeah, it's not really an argument, but so one of the things that I've been really thinking about, and we could talk about this in the chat or later on, is are there really two worlds of Trump supporters? Are there the conservative Trump supporters and then the more radical Trump supporters? Because when you see them, the representations get mixed up. You know what I'm saying? It gets really confusing for somebody like myself to understand, because I don't want to, and Brandon made this point, he felt like I was lumping all conservatives together, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm looking at what happened on the Hill, and I'm looking at what they done, and then I'm looking at more conservative people I've known over the years where Trump is kind of away from that. So that would be something worth exploring. But the other part is, what has really grieved my spirit is the comparison to the social justice unrest to what happened on the Capitol. That was problematic for me from inception for so many reasons, because primarily the root cause. Our country suffers from looking at symptoms instead of root causes. That's why we never really make a lot of progression for unity and coming together. The root cause of unrest is systemic racism and injustice, right? The root cause that happened on the 6th, as we've already talked about, was about an election that one party felt was rigged because it didn't go in their favor. Two completely different levels should never even be put in the same box, and that's unfortunate. So going forth, I hope we can continue communicating and understanding each other's sides, and this is how we eliminate implicit biases, by taking each other's blinders off, by opening us up to see those other sides. So I do appreciate that from you, Andy, and from you. Then, dang, how did I forget your name that quick? Is it Dennis? I'm sorry. Yeah, I was about to say dentist, like I need to go to
We
the
need
dentist.
names
But
like
yeah,
Zoom.
so I appreciate that. We've been waiting to have these type of conversations for months, so this is great.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Andrew, I'd love to hear from you, and in closing, in your overall experience with what you got here today, because a lot of people that we ask to come on the show, their main hesitation is they don't want to feel attacked, and I don't know, do you feel that we in our discussion tonight have either marginalized or tried to ride you down in any way? I mean, do you feel that we were able to have an effective conversation here?
Yeah, so I do a lot of political speaking. I've spoke to Democrat groups, spoke to Republican groups. Again, to reiterate, I'm a libertarian. So while I think most of this show was focused around my support for Trump, I'd like to make clear I also voted for Whitmer and Democrat Representative Slotkins. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a conservative. I just abhor attacks on 1A and 2A. And so when I'm closing remarks, I like to do two things. One, take my big takeaway from what I learned, how my perspective changed from the group. And then two, give a clear closing on what my core principles are. So number one, what did I take away from this group? Several comparisons that I attempted to make in the realm of media coverage and popular response to protests throughout this country for the last year were immediately disrailed and seen as attacks on a social justice movement. What I'm taking away from that is that those raw nerves are more raw than I had previously calibrated, because that's not something I was trying to do, but I saw those responses. So I'm going to go away from here understanding that those nerves are more exposed than I previously thought, and that is something I'm going to seriously think about. Now, one message on my core beliefs: I do not think it is anything special in our blood. I don't think there's anything special about being American that makes us immune to the fallings and pitfalls of humans. And as we look across history, what I see happening from big tech and what I see happening from the youngest members of the Democrat Party scares the crap out of me, because it reminds me of censorship that we've seen throughout history. It reminds me of the taking away of rights, of the silencing of people, of the marginalizing of people, of the dehumanizing of people. I've got a person here in my community here in Lake Orion. He was a former local business owner. He's moved out of the area. local chat room this week. He reached out. This isn't some random guy on the internet. This is a guy from this community that I've done business with. And he said, I have a hard time seeing Trump supporters as fully human. That is shocking, absolutely shocking. So as I watch the steady march and the cheering and the excusing of violations of free speech, as I watch 6 bills go up in the House yesterday and today, looking to place radical restrictions on the Second Amendment, as I watch one right after another under assault, under the guise of a more polite society, my core position is I've never given a damn about a polite society. There are rights and there are wrongs. When you look at something with your human eyes, you can tell whether it's right or wrong. We will not get through this because our flag is so beautiful. We will not get through this because our people are so patriotic. We will not get through this because our presidential candidate won or lost. The only way that we will continue to outpace history is through conversations like this, through sharing our perspective, and more importantly, gathering the perspectives of others. So I'm committed to that, and I thank you all for your time tonight. Thank you all for your perspectives tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well
I do appreciate you coming on. This is one of the things I've been asking for pretty much since I've started doing the show. And and to the effect of the social justice situation, I don't want to say apologize. I want to say that, where this is difficult is where we come to conflict of those raw emotions that you addressed. And I think that's one of the inherent fears that people have in having a discussion, uh, predominantly when you have to look the person in the eye, when the potential for those nerves can be exposed. And I would definitely like to explore that more in terms of how we interact with one another on our belief system. So I totally appreciate your time. I know I've kept you guys for an infinite amount of time tonight. We normally don't go this long. So I know you guys are new, but usually we cap at like hour and a half, 2 hours. I just couldn't see a point where I should say like, hey, let's stop. I wanted to wait for someone of the group to say, hey, it's running a little long. Dennis, thank you for curtailing that for us. So um, I do appreciate it, and I hope that we can have you on again. Like I said, we discuss many different things here. It's not always going to be politics, and I would love to get your level of perception on some other topics as well. So I know I could tell by my viewer numbers here that a lot of people were interested in what we were talking about tonight. Comment section was very robust. I I cannot say enough how much I appreciate it, and I do hope that in the end here that even though we did have disagreements, even though we did have difference in perspectives, that each of us could take a piece of what someone said and at least recognize it. Because one thing Andy mentioned several times was that you wanted us to understand, and that's all I've wanted to do is understand. So I appreciate your ability to express your position with a level of understanding and a level of complexity that can still be relayed to a layman, where I have no idea where you may be coming from or how you're getting to that position. You were able to, address that in a way that someone can understand, not having your background. And that's what I want. And I hope that a lot of my viewers were able to take that from what you were saying tonight, whether they agree or not, to understand, because that's such a huge step where people have disagreements, to be able to take that step back and say, I understand why you're saying what you're saying. So if nothing else, I understand why you're doing what you're doing. So I do appreciate it again. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. We do have the chat room, and the chat room always stays active. So of course, if there's anything you guys wanted to discuss, feel free. And we also use that as a basis to develop where new topics can arise for future episodes. So if there's anything on either of your hearts that you would like to discuss, or bring your position to this arena that, where, as far as how Vernon saw it, 60-40, the viewership may be a different percentage, where you can bring that ideology to that group where they can gain understanding. And it's so important to do so. So thank you so much, guys. I do appreciate it. I hope everyone who was watching was able to get something from this tonight. I would say hands down, this is my favorite episode. My mic didn't die. So we're making progress. So again, thank you all. Have a good night, and I do appreciate it.
Take
Thanks.
it easy, y'all.